Alchemy is the key in the magical world, and a wizard named Rusty skillfully performs his daily quota of distilled water. What exactly is necessary to create a potion and transform magical creatures? Rusty's distilled water stands out. He fills it with magical energy, making it much better. Finishing work on time, Rusty stops the timer and eagerly prepares to devote the afternoon to his favorite research. But his mood instantly changes as alchemical realism addresses him. This unhealthy, overconfident man sneers and begins to insult Rusty. Realism mocks Rusty for his work in the fundamental research department, saying they do nothing important or profitable there, while clearly understanding that the goal of the research is to study and discover new things. Rusty calmly endures the mockery. This is not the first time for him. Realism suggests Rusty visit the president, who wants to discuss a few issues. Walking to the president's office, Rusty, a talented alchemist, thinks about his place in the team and how often he is laughed at. Unlike Rusty, Realism works in the profitable weapons department, brings in money, and because of this others humiliate Rusty for earning little. Arriving at the president's office, Rusty shockingly learns that he has decided to close the fundamental research departments, to cancel the budget completely, effectively liquidating it. The president waved it off, saying the department does not bring profit, giving Rusty small tasks for other departments, effectively making him their errand boy. The president tells him to be grateful for any work and insists that it is a favor. Then he exhales pipe smoke right in Rusty's face and waves it off. Rusty remains silent during the conversation, seeing no point in arguing. With the letter in hand, Rusty leaves the room humiliated and disappointed in himself. Returning to his quarters, he recalls that the president's pipe, like many other tools, was made by the research department. Rusty sits in a chair and looks at the ceiling. With the arrival of the new president, the department's budget and staff were greatly reduced, but he himself carried everything on his shoulders and coped with the stress. The ring of his gadget snapped him out of his daydream. He approached to check the new message. Even the communication device was crafted in his department. This clearly showed how poorly he was treated. But suddenly good news arrives, and his mood soars. A message from Colin, a close friend from school years. They hadn't seen each other since graduation. Victories in the recent war made her a successful warrior, while the research work remained worn out and neglected due to the indifferent president. He plunges into school memories with Colin about the time they turned the classroom into a jungle, and then wrote the teacher a long apology for the mischief. Smiling at the memory, Rusty opens his letter to read it, and Holland warmly greets Rusty and sincerely expresses her deep respect. She excitedly says that she was granted land on the border and now needs his help to develop it. This proposal pushes Rusty to a decisive choice. He can either stay in his neglected apartment and endure the harsh treatment of Mr. Fat and Mr. I don't care, or he can leave everything, grab Tala's offer, and join her. With a bright smile and a spark in his eyes, Rusty looks out the window and decisively quits his thankless job in this terrible place. He wants to find joy again alongside Tala. Having made his decision, Rusty begins packing his things and suddenly remembers. Before the arrival of the new president, he was the senior member of the department, so he is still attached to the job. The former president, Master Hall Hammer, succeeded on his own and deeply valued fundamental research. Together they achieved truly outstanding results. When the government changed, Master Hall Hammer was demoted. A former official came, and since then work has become much worse. Rusty goes to the president's office, but suddenly freezes. Voices are heard behind the door. Realism and the president are actively discussing the research department's budget. Excessive flattery of Realism before the president is almost comical. Like a third-grade student trying too hard to please, and it hurts the ear. I, irritated but restrained, knocked on the rusty door, and two inside got angry upon learning about their rust. Their hostility bursts out in screams and toxic behavior. Calmly and boldly, Rusty places his resignation letter on the president's desk and firmly says that he is done with them. In a moment of pure defiance, Rusty makes a powerful move and it earns him great respect. The president, stunned by this unexpected action, reads the resignation statement soberly without any illusions. The department was disbanded, so Rusty can leave whenever he wants and does not have to train a replacement. The president tries to appear calm, but irritation shows openly on him. He cannot hide it. The president said sharply to Rusty that if he does not appreciate their generosity, he should immediately leave the association. Rusty leaves the president's office before leaving the building. He stops to admire the majestic painting of the alchemist in the dungeon. It awakens a bunch of memories, but he quietly says goodbye and walks away. Outside, Rusty takes a deep breath of fresh air and rejoices that he is finally free from the pressure and problems of the association. He gathers his strength and calls his octopus hippopotamus. When he sets off to Talon, the air seems to whisper about danger. Even his hippopotamus hears a strange sound from afar. Rusty warns his beast to be on alert because of bandits. He shuddered, saw an unconscious figure in the park, stopped, and immediately became cautious. Approaching the figure, Rusty stops. Before him stood the form of a night priest, a follower of the goddess of vengeance. Turning over the unconscious figure, Rusty froze. A cursed pattern appeared on her face, a clear sign of an evil spell. Here is another lady in distress. She sets the tone for this thrilling chapter. By instinct, Rusty instantly activates his powers and begins reading, as a brochure showing her condition hovers over the girl's body. Rusty carefully examines the leaflet and looks closely at the detour. He understands that the girl's life is not in danger. The curse can be controlled and he could consult a specialist, but seeing her in agony, Rusty decides to act alone. He will not let her suffer. Instantly reviewing the diagnosis, he discovers that the fever is caused by poison in her body. He notices a wound on her side. Poison has seeped through it. It seems a familiar did this. Rusty frantically rummages through his bag searching for an antidote, but in vain he finds nothing. So he decides to make it himself. He decisively orders his hippo to guard the wounded Giles. While he sets off to gather the necessary ingredients, Rusty rushes through the forest in search of the required plants, and Sin, out of breath, stops to recover strength. Time in the association has clearly worn down his endurance, and after just a few minutes he was gasping like an old man, so he took the endurance potion and drank it. A surge of energy covered you, and you were lucky. Near the stream you find medicinal herbs. Standing atop this place, Rusty looks around confused. He remembers that once there were many more plants here, but now there are fewer. Probably someone constantly gathers them. Rusty still collects exactly those plants and flowers needed to make the antidote. Her condition is such that it is enough to know simple transmutation. He activates his powers. The ingredients, drops of water, and a scroll rise into the air and merge into one, creating the perfect healing potion. He has made antidotes all his life, so for Rust this matter is a simple trifle. When the potion was ready, he hurried back to the poisonous girls and approaching, heard heavy footsteps. He saw his hippopotamus jumping and smashing something dark and ugly on the ground. Rusty keeps his distance because he is afraid of being under the hippopotamus's stomping feet. Begemot makes one last powerful leap and crushes the creature under his 8 legs. Approaching the unconscious creature, Rusty with relief. I see his beast killed the familiar, who probably was chasing girls, perhaps to finish her off. He drops to his knees and applies the antidote to her wound. The wound instantly heals. Bright sparks flare around it. She opens her eyes, her instincts awaken. She stands and reaches for her sword. Her defensive stance, tense shoulders, and watchful gaze reveal her as a well-trained knight. She studies Rust, unsure if he is an enemy. Rusty points to the dead magical assistant and bitterly says that it was an enemy. She instantly turns and sharply asks, "Who is he?" In an even voice, Rusty begins to say that he is from the association, but stops and gently corrects himself, explaining that he is only a traveling alchemist, and his quick correction sounds smooth. The word alchemist awakens curiosity in the girl and she approaches him. But the residual poison drains her strength and she almost falls. Rusty insists that she not strain herself and offers her the antidote. She looks closely and directly asks how much his help costs, and that is fair. Rast is not used to others being paid for help, so he hesitates. Remembering the times in the association, he scratches his head a little and looks puzzled. But he explains to the girls that he helped her escape from Goodwill. She calls herself Tala, the Knight of the Goddess of Vengeance and the third of the 3 swords, convinced that the antidote is of great value and insists that there must be a way to repay him for his kindness. In response, Rast proposes an interesting plan. He goes to the northern border to work under Tala's leadership and asks her to lend the power of the sword to protect him in case of trouble. Tala agrees, shows her blade, and says in a firm voice that its edge will cut through any threat that may stand in his way. The deal looks completely one-sided. Rast just makes a simple potion, and Tala gives her formidable sword. Some would call this extremely uneven. But Rast does not delay. His eyes are fixed on Tala, who is finishing the preparation of the antidote. Washing the poison off her, then he jumps on this hippo and says goodbye to her. Tala holds the vessel with the potion and looks enchanted as it sparkles in the sun. She considered that elixir a legendary salvation that saved her life, and now she was indebted to this mysterious man. She decides to head north to him after she takes her revenge, hoping to repay him generously. Night falls and Rast, continuing his journey, decides to spend the night climbing down from the hippopotamus. He asks it to rest while he lights a fire. After saying goodbye to Tala, he set off north and walked without stopping until it got dark. He admires the sky as if it were from a fairy tale. Although deep darkness reigns on the horizon, sitting by the fire he feels a rare calm. Since Rust Knight joined the association, he has been locked in a laboratory far from all the beauty of nature. He pulls out a map and looks closely at how far he has advanced to the border, coming across their almost last village before the northern territory. While he studies the map, his hippopotamus secretly tries to nibble something, so Rast instantly reacts and jokingly calls to the animal, "Calm down." He eats his portable rations, faithful companions on the road. The next morning they arrive at Toma, a neglected village, and it is nothing like Rast expected. Almost abandoned, just like Tala's estate. Rast sends his hippopotamus back and sets off to explore the surroundings. Suddenly a man appears behind him, scares Rast and asks, "Who are you?" Rusty calls himself a traveling alchemist, and the word alchemist makes the man pause. He urges Rusty to follow him. They need to meet the village head on the way. Rusty is upset. It hurts him to see how most houses are abandoned and falling apart. So far he does not notice one well-kept house, decorated with intertwined branches near the entrance. Rusty, unable to hide his curiosity, asks, "Is this the chief's house? Where can we find the Kajero tree?" But the man pays no attention to him. He knocks on the door and calls the chief to come meet the alchemist. Suddenly, an elderly man appears with a wooden cane. The man enthusiastically announces that he has brought the alchemist to the chief. The man says he is not sure if Rusty is a real alchemist, although he seems so. And in this, there is the despair of the whole village. Rusty solemnly shows his certificate proof that he is an alchemist. The chief carefully examines the medallion and asks if Rusty holds a high rank. Russ, who had never even thought about it, suddenly realizes that he is actually a high-ranking alchemist. Like many others in this association, the chief insists that Rusty come to his home. He says he wants to ask him something. They are offered tea and a large mug. Rusty drinks the tea with relief after several days on rations. The chief impatiently and sharply asks Rusty if he has any traditional magical crystals. Somewhat surprised, Rusty agrees to help to find or make the crystals. He asks with obvious surprise, "Why do they need old models?" The chief replies coldly, "The magical weapon was modernized almost a year ago during the war." "Wait, why do you need weapons, old man?" The chief angrily explains that both old and new magical pistols were supplied by Zala, a guy who immediately seemed suspicious, and complains that the new pistols turned out to be a complete fraud. Zala still produces both types of weapons, and the chief, with passion in his voice, explains how this weapon became a shield for defenseless peasants against beasts. The 32-gun ship proudly stood out for its fuel efficiency and excellent characteristics. However, the latest Model 1 brought with it a bunch of problems. It was too expensive, especially the crystals. It constantly broke down and did not inspire confidence. Worse still, the manufacturer stopped supplying the old crystals, forcing the peasants to buy the new model and spend extra money. Because of this, the beasts began attacking more and more often, and people were dying. Rusty listens carefully to their concerns and agrees to make the old crystals. But in return, he asks Kodro to leave his board. The chief and Zal looked at each other puzzled. Yet he agreed to take him to the trees burdened with cargo. They arrive and the chief orders everyone, gather as much cargo and fruit as possible. After that, Rusty decisively gets to work and pulls out 3 scrolls. Look how proudly he shows off his talents. He knows that magical stones originate from beasts. But there is another way. He uses elements of the atmosphere. He takes the fruit of Kagra and carefully mixes it to purify the elements and form a crystal-clear diamond. Rusty enthusiastically explains that magical crystals have 3 parameters: size, power, and capacity, which must match. If not, they will not work. Fortunately, Rusty still remembers the standards of the old crystals and skillfully uses them. Magical elements sealed in Keger's fruit merge and form a magical crystal. Light, strength, and brilliance seem to dance around Rusty as he acts skillfully and confidently. He finishes and holds the crystal in his hand, proud of his success. The peasants behind greet him and admire his magic. The crystals are ready. Rusty gives one to the chief and says to him, "Load the 32 caliber pistol and try it." The chief nods, takes the pistol and inserts the crystal, raises it to the sky and shoots. The rifle thundered and fired a bullet at incredible speed. It cut a huge hole in the sky and the clouds swirled around. This spectacle impressed everyone, and they joyfully welcomed it because now they can live without fear of beasts and magical creatures. Rusty smiles, happy that the peasants celebrate thanks to his creation, which gives him peace. After that, he rushes to make even more crystals, and after an hour of intense work, he produces so many that the peasants will live off these supplies for years. Imagine, the power of this crystal would be twice as much as the market one. When he was told about such an unusual offer, the chief's eyes instantly widened. He can hardly imagine such wealth. His people lived in poverty for centuries, and no one helped them. The chief begins to run through in his mind the options for using all these crystals, and gradually plunges into a sea of ideas about their possibilities. Soon the leader calms down, becomes silent, and loudly orders everyone to gather the crystals and bring them to the village. Rusty attracted the boss's attention and asked to talk alone about an urgent matter. The boss agreed. Privacy is needed for this conversation. He waves his hand and calls Rusty to follow him to his house. Before leaving, he orders the villagers to clear the debris, but Rusty approaches and cleans everything in a moment. The pair enters the leader's house, where Rusty is served a cup of tea and a mug. Their poverty is noticeable, and when Rusty takes a sip of warm tea, he is enveloped by pleasant warmth. Apparently, this is the reward for the whole hard day. He sets the mug aside and his face becomes serious. The chief looked like he was on pins and needles, as if waiting for bad news. But Rusty Consum assures this is not a serious problem. He just wants to talk about what they should do next. The chief was worried that Rusty might demand payment for all the crystals, and he feels like he just avoided a crisis. Rusty explains that he made so many crystals that one would be enough for the village for years, and now he wonders if other villages still use those outdated magical crystals. The chief says with pain in his voice that all the villages in this remote area desperately need these crystals, and Rusty could help them a lot. Rusty took a confident stance and loudly announced that he would conduct the affairs of the new Night Kingdom of Kalon and develop crystal trade from there. Just the mention of Kalon and the boss straightens up. Rusty is not just a skilled alchemist. He also has connections with some of the most powerful and famous warriors of his time. The boss asks if this is the same Kalon who knocks down 3 men in armor with one sword strike. She seems fragile, but within her lives a strength that surpasses even the mightiest fighter. That's why she got the nickname. Rusty interrupts and firmly refuses to hear the nickname against, tired of it being repeated constantly. The nickname makes his old friends from the academy seem like monsters. The boss sincerely apologizes and Rusty returns to the topic. He wants to quietly talk to the chiefs about this, Lord, because creating a new domain takes money and brings a lot of difficulties. But he hasn't told Colin about this, yet she might have her own plans regarding him. Rusty takes another sip of tea and involuntarily thinks, maybe Colin and the Lord of the village can agree on a deal or strategy that will benefit him and the villagers. Because Rusty created so many magical crystals that everyone could get their own. The chief can give something to the Lord to negotiate a favorable deal for us. Roz's mind works like a well-coordinated mechanism, and he immediately asks for it. A pen and paper from the chief to write a letter to a friend. This friend from the academy now serves in the army because this concerns weapons and magical crystals. Rusty foresees the objections of others that may stand in his way to success. People like Realism, whose income and entire activity are firmly based on the crystals and weapons supplied by Rusty, risk being put on hold. Realism jealously keeps his gains to himself and does not want to share them with others, especially with Roz, whom he deeply offended. Rusty does not pay any attention to this fool. He strives to build an empire and will not waste time on such petty, unimportant people. He knows the crystals will sooner or later spread beyond the region and attract the attention of Realism and his team. If noticed, the army might intervene, and the consequences are unpredictable. Therefore, Rusty finishes writing the official letter and rolls it up. And he presses the initials of his pendant. This is how he shows his high rank. He stands up already ready to leave, but the chief asks Rusty to stay overnight. Rusty politely refuses and wants to continue his journey as soon as possible. Wessie comes out of the house. Villagers immediately gather around him and beg for help with their affairs. Confused, Rusty sharply raises his head. Popo hastily leaves the village to avoid delay because these villagers are too intrusive. On his travels, Rusty wonders. The wasteland is like empty, no beast, no creature, so he does not know what monsters might threaten him. Suddenly, a monster attacks. Popo's senses sharpen. He crushes the monster's tentacles and it instantly loses. Rusty angrily condemns Popo and collects the remains of the dead monster, which might be useful later. He reviews the map. It shows that very soon he will be near a body of water. From there, the road will be very short. Rusty arrives at the lake and intends to rest. But Popo's restlessness does not give him peace. He is always on alert. Something stirred in the water and began to emit a magical aura. Rusty cautiously approaches closer to check. But a small lizard suddenly flies out and almost touches his face, struggling hard to break free from the slippery tentacles of the monster chasing it. Caught in a trap, the unfortunate lizard looks at Rusty fearfully. This makes him suppose a child transformed into a lizard but without human eyes and without any emotion. Rusty hesitates whether to save that creature or not touch it. Many creatures imitate human emotions to deceive and attack, and this is the law of the wild. Only the strong survive and predators hunt the weak. Still, the lizard's eyes captivate Russ. He decisively orders Popo to strike the tentacles and immediately release the lizard. Popo does not wait for a second order and jumps into the air like a ballerina with 8 tentacles weighing over 500 kilograms, breaks the tentacle holding the lizard, and the wounded lizard retreats into the water. Rusty grabs the severed tentacle, will keep it for later, and carefully examines the lizard, which does not respond at all to his light nudging. It seems the lizard has used up all its strength. It is completely exhausted. Our hero activates his ability and carefully examines the creature. But since it is a beast, it is difficult for him to understand exactly what is wrong. Fortunately, he awakens new abilities within himself and sees that the lizard is completely exhausted. Perhaps its mitochondria simply refuse to work properly. They are weakened, having spent too much energy to avoid pursuit. Rusty orders Popo to stay alert. The small creature swiftly dives into the water and engages in battle with the catfish monster, while Rusty looks for a way to restore the lizard's health. Having successfully defeated the catfish monster, Hippo proudly shows it to his master as a trophy. Rusty applies the potion to the lizard and watches with a satisfied smile as its energy slowly returns. Mitochondrial activity has noticeably increased, possibly even beyond normal. He wants to leave the lizard, but hesitates because he fears that after all his efforts, another predator might find and kill it. Rusty decides to take the unconscious lizard with him for the rest of the journey and keep it on his lap. He pulls out a map, plans the rest of the route, and suddenly sees that he will have to walk along the river from the pond to reach the destination. Rusty arrives at the camp with round tents and thinks it belongs to Colin, but Hippo stops and looks worried. This was slowing down all forward movement. Russ is not a fool. He feels that something is wrong. He climbs down from his beast, lifts the medallion, and loudly proclaims, "I am Russ." He is a master alchemist of the highest rank. His sect unites people who passionately seek the truth. And he really sets out to this land by invitation of the Knight Colonel. Although Rusty is not stupid, sometimes he is a bit out of himself, shouting into the air and waiting for his medallion. Suddenly 2 girls appear, their faces partially covered with pieces of cloth and look like a one-eyed cat sticking out its tongue. "Well done, Colin, very skillful." One of the Geralds suddenly draws her sword but still greets Russ. He explains that the monsters in the area can disguise themselves as humans, so strict precautions are necessary. Rusty finally understood why Hippo was so nervous. He sensed danger from afar. If Hippo had not stopped, the girls could have attacked them. Our main hero Tax put the medallion back into his pocket and confidently looked at the 2 girls. The girls froze in surprise. He noticed them so quickly. Continuing to pretend to be cool, one Gerald feels a powerful aura from Hippo, and Whirly anxiously asks if there is a monster on the beast's back. She is almost attacking already, but Erie's sister manages to intervene. Rusty boldly takes full responsibility for the lizard and firmly assures them that it does not threaten them. The girl relaxes, and he meanwhile notices with surprise that the younger sister has a unique visual ability. She can see at great distances, and the older one seems to be able to sense the power of people or beasts. After the introduction, the girls lead Rusty to the tent where It is impressive to see how so many people work with a large communication device, and it seems as if all the data is concentrated at headquarters. He is delighted by how they work here. The work is flawless and the employees are true masters. While he watches the operations, Colin calls him from behind and enthusiastically approaches him. Colin has not aged at all. She is still incredibly beautiful. She approaches Rust and firmly takes his hand. He winced in pain. Poor Russ has been without female company for many years. Colin is glad to have met Rusty again after so many years and jokes that he has aged. Rusty is clearly not thrilled with the remark but keeps himself together, while Colin simply radiates bright energy. And she, pointing at the 2, asks if her girls in masks caused him any trouble. Rusty feels that Colin arranged their meeting, probably hoping for some adventure. It seems this is her way of having fun. Rusty scratched his head and insisted that there were no problems with the girls. He was a romantic, not a fighter. "Enough of this fuss already, Russ." Colin smiles sorry. She quietly invites him, "Come with me on a tour of the camp." It seems to me Colin is really very caring. The world teems with magic that changes the soil, animals, and monsters, and miraculously bypasses people. Explain why. Turning back to the camp, Colin, as if it were nothing, lifts an entire table with one hand, making room for her and Rusty so they could sit and discuss matters. She strictly orders Rohan to bring tea, first making sure that they are alone in the tent. Rusty Sensashi's old friend is about to say something serious. He jokingly says that he thought this job was just a rest, and extracting magical elements from underground. Colin easily takes the joke, smiles, and says, "Partly yes, but this role requires much more than it seems." She calls him the genius of the academy, a nickname that stuck since school years. Ross, hiding his embarrassment, asks what is troubling her. Colin twists her gloves in his hands before explaining what he needs. First, tame the disease spreading through the camp, heal the people, and only then look for its source. Rusty gets up with clear tasks and he is led to the tent. On the way, he feels an unfriendly atmosphere. People look at him coldly and ignore his greetings. They have serious attitude problems, and Rusty also concludes that the disease here is endemic. The newcomers to the camp gradually fall ill, and the symptoms begin to make themselves known. Rusty felt better. 2 girls were kinder to him than others, but he is mistaken. The younger sister firmly warns him, "Do not humiliate Lady Colin, otherwise I will not forgive you." After that, the sisters disappear. Rusty understands, to earn the camp's trust, he will have to work much harder than he expected. He enters a spacious tent without furniture, just as he expected from Colin, because he knows that he prefers his own. Rusty uses his powers and creates a soft carpet and a fluffy beanbag chair so the lizard can rest. The lizard was so exhausted that it slept through the entire journey. Rusty then summons the manifest rose of the transmuted beast. It resembles a plant, but at the same time looks like a hippopotamus and nature itself. He orders the rose to craft a sturdy bed for the lizard so she can rest peacefully. After that, Rusty orders to prepare beds for the patients who will come to his tent for treatment. After that, he finally allows Rowan and Erie to let patients in one by one to provide help to each. He listens to their almost identical complaints: fatigue, body aches, and soreness. Rusty distributes potions to ease symptoms and find out where the illness came from. Side effects may occur, but he will deal with them later. Right now, it is more important to start treatment correctly. Rowan can hardly believe his eyes. Rusty manages to see almost all patients before sunset. He carefully compiles a detailed report on symptoms and possible side effects after treating the last patient. Rusty offers the tired Rohan a potion to cheer him up and relieve fatigue. She swallows the drink, surprised at how her energy returns again, quickly thanks him and hurriedly leaves. Rusty sincerely tries to find common ground with others, but they need some time to get used to him. He finishes writing the report and is already going to meet Colin. On the way, grateful workers sincerely thanked him for healing them. They said from friend Collins and expected nothing less. Unlike the previous job, where there was little praise and Rusty rarely heard words of recognition for his work, now he finally feels valued. Night falls over the camp and he hurries to Colin's tent. Having entered inside, he encounters an attractive colonel. She immediately asks why he came so late, and he hands her the prepared report. Colin reviews it, impressed by its efficiency, and her striking eyes are full of gratitude. Rusty tries to downplay his role, but a loud rumble in his stomach immediately reveals his nerves. Rups caused Colin to emit a soft, warm laugh and admitted she hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Russ's charisma is undeniable. Enough, the next day Rohan and Erie lead Rusty to the food storage to check. Before setting off, he calls Hippo let him carry them. In the warehouse, Rusty focusedly swings the pendulum and uses it to measure the density of magical elements outside. The stronger the magic, the wider the pendulum swings, and Rusty hurriedly notes the readings on the scroll. While walking around the warehouse, he notices a dense magical concentration in the ground so powerful that microbes do not survive, and the surrounding area becomes sterile. He catches several familiar strong readings and suddenly realizes Rohan can help. A pleasant surprise, especially considering his usual aloofness. Rusty was the least pleased with this unexpected cooperation. The master alchemist notices that magical elements are extremely concentrated everywhere. Products are usually hidden in the semi-basement. It is cool and dark there. In remote regions, strong magic burns out microbes. This is a common practice that ensures the prepared food is safe. How hard it is to come to terms with the thought that local microbes in the food cause illness. Rusty thoughtfully wonders, could the remains of a monster that once lived in the pantry be the cause? To avoid remaining in ignorance, he plans to ask Rowan whether this was the monster's lair and which one exactly. He smiles, impatiently awaiting Rowan's reaction to his leading question, and Rowan simply says that the nest belonged to a bear. This ignites Russ's curiosity about that creature. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a man approaching. He asks tremblingly if this is really Master Rusty, and sincerely thanks him for helping his younger brother. The man says that his brother's limb numbness was terribly troublesome, but Rusty's treatment greatly improved his condition. His family is full of gratitude, so he sincerely offers Rusty any help to repay him. Rusty smiles, suspecting that the brother was one of those he treated yesterday. Rusty asks to inspect the food storeroom, and the man leads him inside. Rusty carefully examines everything around. He sees various food items. Here they process literally everything from monster meat to vegetables and grains. Rusty notes that the storeroom, packed full of ingredients from monsters, looks like the end of a bad joke, and he notices with relief that the food is well preserved without poison or monster remains. Rusty warmly thanks the man and allows him to lock the room when he leaves. Harry anxiously asks, can the compound be ruled out as the source of the disease? Rusty warns, for now one cannot be completely sure. The investigation must continue. Erie's older sister asks, where are they going next? Rusty points to a jug of clean water for drinking and cooking and says that this is their next stop. They approach the jug, which measures out limited water drop by drop across Colin's territory. Rusty sees that the jug is old but confirms that the purification works properly and found no faulty parts. Rusty thinks that if his secret were as transparent as the water in the jug, everything would be simpler, and the numbness from the disease whispers to him about poisoning, so he checks both food and water. He feels the decision will not be easy. Rowan abruptly interrupts and asks, is it time for a lunch break? Rusty freezes for a moment in fear before agreeing, and finds the persistent request for a lunch break strange. But he understands well that Colin probably instructed the sisters to make sure he eats while they accompany him. Reflecting, Rusty recalled how Colin force-fed him during intense research at the academy. The sisters lead him to the camp canteen and say that the food is prepared in a tent nearby. Before starting to eat, he asks Sippo what he wanted to eat. He was ashamed that even his favorite eats better than him. Rusty skillfully prepares the hippopotamus's favorite dish, finely chopped magical stones and herbal pellets, because he knows that transformed animals need balanced magical nutrition. This dish seems made for the hippopotamus. He eagerly eats it. The sisters bring Rasa's dish. Here is the main dish from hunted monsters, smoke for preservation. On the plate, a side dish of fried, edible parts of local plant monsters, and the main dish of finely ground dry grains. The menu is modest, but the cooks clearly try to make the taste at least a little better. Rusty asks if everyone eats in the canteen, and Rohan quietly explains. Families more often eat at home, and most loners die right in the canteen. It's as if he found himself in the Rusty Academy canteen. Everyone eats silently, and he feels the sisters looking at him through their masks. He anxiously asks if they noticed anything common among the patients, or if anyone heard about new cases today. Erie assures that he did not work during the meal. She adds that she has not heard of new cases and has not seen any common signs among the patients. Rusty catches the gist in Erie's comment. It is said that many patients are unmarried. Erie explains this is not LAR, but adds that it is a valid observation. Rowan says, I brought patients from the singles tent. This touched Russ. He suspects that the pattern confirms. Singles eat in the cafeteria. And he begins to write down his thoughts. It is because of this that Rusty discovers something, and urgently tells the nurses, stop eating. He finds traces of the monster's neurotoxin in the food, exactly those corresponding to the symptoms. Riley smiles and says that even lunch breaks bring breakthroughs. While Rusty checks the food, Erie decisively warns everyone in the tent to stop eating. Noticed possible poisoning. Rusty nods and says, many patients from the singles tent go to the cafeteria, and the water purification system works properly, so he narrows down the circle of suspects. The sisters stand confused when the kitchen manager approaches and asks about the problem with the food. Rusty apologizes for calling her so suddenly, introduces himself, and says that by Lady Colin's order he is investigating this illness, and asks to inspect the kitchen. He wants to check his theory. Inside, Russ's testimony ominously confirms his suspicions. He asks Rohan to deliver a message to Colin, and says to the kitchen manager in a tense voice that she needs to act immediately. She agrees, and Rusty tells her to come to Colin's tent in an hour to explain everything fully. In an hour, everyone, even the singles tent manager and the kitchen manager, gather in Colin's tent. Colin, with a trembling voice, asks Rusty if he managed to overcome the epidemic. Rust, feeling heroic, smiles slightly and proudly. He says that the lake lying upstream from the camp river hides a monster. Its neurotoxic poison contaminates the water. The problem is not with the purified drinking water, it is with the water used in the laundry to wash the dishes. Colin confirms. They really use this water for such purposes, and Rusty in the singles tent finds traces of poison on the dishes and clothes. They penetrate the body through the skin and mouth, accumulate inside, and provoke disease. His discovery shocks everyone, who is ashamed that they missed it. Collins calmly explains to everyone, there was little purified water, it had to be conserved, so he cannot be blamed. Colin admits she distributed the water evenly. She decides to review exactly how the water is distributed among the objects, and get rid of that monster upstream that causes poisoning. Rusty says that by saving the white lizard, he has already defeated the monster, making everyone marvel even more. Colin jokingly asks if Rusty can really see the future. After a night of working with patients, the next day she found the source of the disease and destroyed the monster. Its speed seemed almost audacious to her. Rusty explains, his voice trembling, the source of the poison has disappeared. The water will soon be fine. Popo and I have confirmed that there are no other monsters in the pond. Returning to Colin, Rusty said, the task is completed. By his outstanding work, he earned her admiration, and she sincerely thanks him. Rusty says anxiously, since the illness is caused only by a small dose of poison, cases may increase. He promised to treat everyone affected and asked Colin to send to him anyone who feels unwell. He calls, agrees, and asks about the update of the filtering jug. Rusty consents will happen only if sufficient funding appears. Colin promises to give everything he needs, and Rusty rejoices he completed his first mission. He cannot wait for life on the border, but he is frightened by problems in the Alchemists Association. Later, Erie introduces herself as she is in Rohan. Go down Portman Street in the capital, look into every shop window and every niche in search of that big rusty water jug they asked for. While they discussed ruse, Harry felt his colossal combat power from the first moment and understood that he was completely unlike other alchemists. She is convinced, even all together, they would not cope with him, and therefore suspects that mixed feelings towards Russ are awakening in Rohan. Harry wants to talk openly about his feelings, but feels as if Rohan is holding them back. They enter the store for a jug, and then head to the Rusty Mansion magical items shop. Walking through the city, Erie feels tension cutting into the calm of Portland Street, and notices passers-by with serious faces. Probably because there are so many magical shops in this area. They enter the right store, where a friendly seller warmly greets them. The sisters eagerly examine the magical items when suddenly the seller offered to buy their goods. The guard, noticing that they were not dressed like alchemists, suspiciously asks who sent them. They show the alchemist Russ's seal, and she immediately agrees to buy their things. Even when prices for alchemical goods were soaring, Rusty ordered to keep the usual prices. She respects him and enthusiastically praises his excellent potions. Her honesty impressed everyone, and the sisters receive a generous sum, which Rusty allowed to be counted as travel expenses. Leaving the store, Erie suggests having a tasty meal and they head to a restaurant. They recall how they started their assignments, how Colin searched for doctors even before Russ, but everyone fled afraid of the disease. Progress began only with Rusty's arrival. The sisters patiently tolerated him, and soon everyone left his tent better. He quickly saved patients and eradicated the cause of the disease, proving that he is exceptional. At the table, while eating, Erie thoughtfully puzzles over whether to ask Rusty for help with her eye problem. The sisters quietly nod through their masks, and new ideas swirl in their minds. In the Alchemists Association equipment storage, Realist grumbles, complaining about his duties and reproaching Rusty for abandoning them. He is sure Rusty is not loyal and does not value the association at all. Recently, the association was hit by numerous problems, so all master alchemists had to leave their usual tasks and start putting things in order. Dangerous materials are kept in special storage. They must be handled very carefully because some monster parts can explode if mishandled. Previously, the storage was overseen by an administrator, but due to budget cuts, he was fired, and Realist clearly remembers that after Rusty joined the basic research department, he himself headed the storage, which was later disbanded, and because of this, the dangerous materials ended up unsupervised. Problems begin first and most disgusting. A viscous liquid is ejected from the scavenger's mucus. The Realist knows access to the storage is only for masters because there are dangerous first-class materials, so masters cannot entrust subordinates with work inside it. At that very moment, a subordinate ran in to report problems and a statement. The vice president of the Arms Association calls the Realist. The Realist gave orders to his subordinate Tech. Other masters must cover the storage while he meets with the vice president. Left alone, Tech racks his brain on how to manage the masters. He decides to close the storage door to keep the magical elements inside. But he realizes, to lock it, a master's medallion is needed. He approaches the entrance of the association and stands there waiting for someone to return. The safe door remains ajar. Meanwhile, Vice President Horn fiercely scolds the Realists for making him wait. The Realists sadly say that the supplies of the basic material for transmutation are lagging. Horn sternly demands to deliver equipment to the army for the upcoming war and threatens fines for delays. Realist apologizes, but Horn, sensing his unpleasant smell, got angry. Realist understands that this is from the collector's line and tries to change it, but Horn stubbornly demands a delivery schedule. Realist nervously looks at Salazar, and it is clear Salazar is also unsure. Someone confidently promises that the order will be ready tomorrow. Horn agrees, and the Realist begins to panic. The task is too difficult. Later, even on a day off, all apprentice alchemists gather in the weapons alchemy department laboratory. Realist says that he needs to deliver magical schematics to the Weapons Association, since the army needs firearms and the deadline is already approaching. Realist raises an eyebrow and doubts the reasons for the delays, and Salazar sighs and explains that they lack a sufficient amount of high-quality distilled water for the solutions used in writing the schematics. Realist is stunned how such a simple problem can cause such chaos. Tao arrives with a device for checking magical circuits and a board with distilled water. They try to perform transmutation, but Tao scrutinizes the board. It turned out that it has enough magical elements, but it stubbornly does not start. There is a lack of energy, and the magical radiation is unstable. The alchemist notices that Russ's distilled water would make the solutions better. Irritable Realist orders silence about Russ. His envy cannot be hidden. Realism reports that it will create distilled water better than Rust to quickly complete magical circles. His irritation and competitive spirit break out when he takes on the task. He steadfastly strives to show his skills, and after a few hours, Realism evaluates the quality of his distilled water, impatiently awaiting results. Zabuza tells him that it exceeds expectations, but cautiously keeps silent that it does not reach the safety threshold. This oversight increases the risk of product quality deterioration, and if problems arise, can seriously damage the association's reputation. Sabater agrees Rusty water was better but continues to move forward. He remains silent about Realism's reaction and only dryly notes that the values meet standards. Satisfied, Realism pushes the alchemist to continue working on the system. As midnight approaches, the laboratory begins to shake from a growing explosion behind. Tao in shock noticed that he left the storage door ajar, and because of this, the voracious slime filled with magical elements began to uncontrollably spread. The alchemist is in panic. The slime spreads and destroys the laboratory. They panic and grab tools to fend off somehow, even a wooden box containing a magical schematic. But the size and strength of this slime make it a terrible opponent. Alchemists throw everything they have at it, desperately trying to contain the damage. The night turns into an intense struggle. They fight against the slime that relentlessly spreads, and their initial confidence suddenly falters under the pressure of the crisis. Just as Realism was about to intervene, an explosion thundered, throwing him back. The rest of the alchemists abandoned realism, plunged into taming chaos and yet managed to complete their work. Salazar ordered Cuddy to deliver the magical diagrams to the Weapons Association at dawn. After realism, the slippery creature retreats, and he allows her to use the transformed beast to move around. Meanwhile, Colin's morning starts very early. She notices her tousled hair after sleep but pays no attention to it. She eagerly enjoys a hearty steak for breakfast, and although there is little food at the border, she eats just like her team and trains with them. Colin meets every challenge with a smile on his lips, but at night he is tormented by nightmares. She still feels the disappointment and helplessness that overwhelmed her when her subordinates fell ill, and is sincerely grateful to those who saved them. Palin knows Rusty left the association after her call because he considered his former boss incompetent. Now under her leadership, she promised to give him freedom and rewards. One morning, seeing that Rusty woke up early, she asks if he is going out. He says he is gathering materials, and she anxiously asks him to be careful and thanks him again for the help. She feels that she will forever remain indebted to him for the rescue. She promises to give him everything he needs. Colin sincerely advises Rusty to rely on others, and warns that the habit of being a loner sooner or later can harm his health. He shouldn't always do everything on his own. Rust, impressed by how she has grown as a leader, smiled broadly and allowed her to support him. They promise to work side by side. Their partnership is stronger than ever. Rusty returns to the camp on his faithful hippopotamus after a successful hunt, and everything around glows with hope. Colin received funds to put an end to the water shortage. The hunters have already gathered all the necessary materials from the monsters. Now only the jars remain to be obtained. The mangaka's love for the character is evident in everything. So for now, everything is going smoothly, but a big plot twist may fall ahead. Rusty suspects that he will have to hunt more monsters to satisfy the growing needs of the camp. And fortunately, he has prepared the necessary scrolls in advance. Soon Rusty and Hippo return to the camp, and the crowd gladly welcomes Rusty back from the hunt. In the whirl of excitement, he notices Leitna and approaches him. Rusty, with a sparkle in his eyes, tells that during the monster hunt, he came across fascinating alchemical materials, and this immediately interested Leitna. The young novice alchemist, barely containing his excitement, asks to buy materials at the monster disassembly station. Everyone looks at Rusty. The whole camp eagerly awaits to see the monster he brought. Rust elegantly waved his hand, uttered a spell, opened a scroll, and from it appeared a four-male twin 9 Hun. Everyone was stunned that one hunter could bring down such majestic beasts. Shrugging at their admiration, Rusty casually says that he has more. He reveals 1,000 rats, a hell horse, and a mole bear. In the hall, Leitna's jaw dropped. Then Rusty approaches Inspector Me and, like everyone in the camp, shows him the caught monsters, and the inspector cannot hide his admiration for Rust's skill. The fact that he had never seen 1,000 rat before, and that mole-like bears and hell horses are famous for being hard to hunt, only more brightly highlights Rust's impressive skill. Rusty goes to Rose, but this is not a girl named Rose, but a real Rose. He sincerely thanks Rose for watching over his things and asks her to continue doing so. Meanwhile, his faithful companion Rosa successfully brought a bunch of jugs to the camp. Rusty sincerely thanks Rosa and carefully examines the jugs. Impressed that she found moons, he curiously asked if it was difficult for her to transport them. Rosa waved her hand and said, "In the capital, the atmosphere is tense and some goods are getting more expensive." Rusty impatiently asks about Colin, but learning that everything was reported to him, he also believes everything. Stopping the small talk, Rusty gets to work and asks Roger to step aside while he casts the cleansing spell on the water again. This process requires more physics than a 9th-grade textbook. Like a real alchemist, Rusty turns magical stones into dust. Carefully mixing them with crystal-clear water, he directs magical energy so that it remains pure and does not violate the laws of physics. Thus he prepared a magical elixir that solved the problem of the magic circle, and Roy was amazed by its effectiveness. Rusty moves from physics to the very basics of chemistry, and it turns out to be quite complicated. Continuing to purify the water, he completely ignores the limitations of gravity and grabs his chemistry textbook. He throws into the water strange-shaped constructions, possibly magical visual images or real chemical formulas, and connects the magical solution to the magical scheme of the jug. You can only eat the magical crystal to charge the jug, or use formulas to permanently purify the water. Rusty Evertoro enthusiastically explains the physics and chemistry of all this to purify the water, and then applies the same methods to the rest of the jugs. Excited, Robert approaches the group and beams, saying that now they can take as much water as they need, but Rusty interrupts and explains that this is only the beginning of what applied chemistry and physics can do. Robert, like the others, stands embarrassed, and Rusty begins to explain. At this stage, the jugs are just for storing water, and then he enthusiastically announces a plan to create a new magical device that will free them from the need to carry water to the camp. Rust declares that according to the first law of applied chemistry, he will summon rain from the sky, Enro, puzzled and interested by this bold statement, asks if he can really do it. She says she wants to see how it all happens. Rusty calls her to the lake. Hippo instruction how to collect water and carefully prepares the magical device to extract water from the pot. The process is too complex for details, as is the chemistry itself. Meanwhile, the hippopotamus surfaced from the lake with a small fish in its mouth, as if to say that there are no great threats or monsters in the depths. Rusty sets up the device, and Ro can't resist and asks if this device depends on the magical stone of some monster. Rusty confirms, explaining that he himself checked the water to make sure there was no paralyzing cloud in it, a byproduct of an extremely dangerous monster, invulnerable to any physical attacks. Ro can only guess what Rust is really capable of. When Rusty turns on the device, Ro asks with curiosity, "What is it called?" Rusty casually suggests calling it a device that distributes water into clouds, when it starts turning water into clouds. He says the paralyzing cloud resembles a cloud monster, and at its center is a magic stone. Robert held his breath and watched with admiration as the clouds floated toward the pitchers, guided by the magic circle that Rusty placed inside to direct the water. Imagine clouds unaffected by physical interference. They are like gas, shapeless and without a fixed volume, and this idea is simplified by an outdated concept. Smiling, he jokes about EMK2. Pipes are useless in the camp due to monster attacks, so Rust plans a clever and impressive combination of magic and applied chemistry. Rust, Ro, and Hippo return to the camp. Rusty and Ro are riding on the animal. Rusty glows with satisfaction. Water is pouring into the pitchers as planned, but suddenly Erie called him and informed that Lady Colin needs him. Rusty rushes to meet Colin. He wants to find out if something is wrong. He hands over two parchments, one open, the other still sealed. She excitedly says that an ordinary alchemist would need days to set up the system with the jug and purification, but Rusty did it almost instantly. Ignoring the compliment, Rusty carefully reviews the parchments that seem to have come from Thomas's village. He turned to Colin with a question while she consulted the feudal lord before starting to trade magical crystals. Noticing that the situation seemed favorable, Colin's facial expression instantly became serious. He decisively stated, "Circumstances are much more important than simple promises." To be honest, it really impresses. Colin gently takes Rusty by the collar and asks what trick he used. Rusty protests, telling Colin that she is tearing his shirt. Seeing this, Colin instantly steps back. He knows about her immense strength, and she could easily shake Rusty if she grabbed him by the collar and shook him. After a short pause, Rusty assures Colin there was no trickery. Enterprise revolves around traditional magical crystals. Collins became interested and with a spark in his eyes asked, "Are these H32-sized crystals?" Embarrassed, she asks if Rusty can really handle it and in a moment admits, Rusty of course can handle it. Getting down to business, Colin looked intently at Rusty and asked, "Do you understand that diving into the interests of capital is to challenge those who control it?" Rusty confirms that he understands. He barely winked at Colin and looks slightly irritated. Colin, with a tremor in his voice, asks if Rusty expects that she has to deal with further conflicts. It would be funny to see them both, Rusty washing dishes and Colin juggling several jobs. Rusty says he consulted with Harold, and all the answers are already written on the parchment. Colin freezes for a moment, suddenly remembering that Harold never used parchment. It becomes clear, problems are brewing in the capital, and she says she has already heard similar concerns from Erie and Ro, although she had no idea that everything would turn out to be so serious. Obviously, Rusty and Colin are plotting something. Laka looks like old friends quietly conspiring in an adult math class. Their thoughts coincide. They see a great opportunity and decide at what exact moment to start acting. Colin entrusts Rusty to investigate and says that he will have a lot of work. Rusty kindly took her by the arm, accepting the challenge. He says that this situation somehow takes him back to the old days. A light breeze gently stirs the air, but it is not strong. Today, Rusty is launching his magical crystal project in the neighboring domain, and he is waiting by the camp entrance together with Rowan and Ro. The sunlight is so soft and gentle that even the wait feels pleasant. Rowan suddenly exclaimed. He sees a group approaching. His gaze fell on one figure. She seemed formidable. Rusty realizes that he has handed over all negotiations to others and does not know the details at all. But the contract and all the boring details of the deal are the work of external contractors. Fraying Rusty, focused on transforming kokoro fruits into magical crystals for great profit, now has great freedom of action. There are no clear limits on crystal extraction, neither minimum nor maximum, so they do it as convenient. He will still consult with Colin before serious changes in production volumes, and Rusty is impressed they managed to achieve such favorable conditions. Surveying the area, he understood. This is a remote backwater without proper roads, where mules are much more practical than wheeled transport. He is confident, in the future the first priority should be to put the roads in order. After all these decisions are made by Boss Colin, so Rusty is not worried at all. Looking over the caravan, he sees wounded people among the crowd and immediately assumes, they were probably attacked. Next, he notices a familiar face in the group as Zala and instantly approaches to greet her. It seems that once Zala was a student of Rast, she warmly greets Rasti and encourages him with a few words. Rasti notices the wounded in the caravan and immediately offers them treatment. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt, so Rasti immediately takes out a potion to help the wounded. Amid the wild noise, Rowan calls Rasti. Rasti froze in surprise upon seeing Tala in the middle of the caravan. He remembers her as Nake, the one who was saved when she was going to meet the calendar. Tal says she was just going to talk to Rasti, and when she found out the caravan was going the same way, she decided to join without hesitation. Zala adds, Tala has saved the caravan from a monster more than once. Rasti welcomes Tala at the border with open arms and a warm greeting. After polite words, he gently suggests she relax with a cup of tea, sensing that she might be tense. He feels that Tala wants to talk about something private, away from prying ears, so Rusty invites her to his tent for tea. And Tala immediately agrees without any hesitation. Meanwhile, Zala asks Rusty to carry the kegger's fruits to the square, what Round calls a simple task. Inside the tent, Rusty shows Tala everything around, and Tala freezes in amazement. All the furniture is made of ice, and Rusty gently invites her to sit, addressing her as Lady Tala. Tala quickly asks him to skip the formalities, reminds him that she saved his life, and insists on being called Tala. Rusty replies that she can also call him Rusty. It seems that a connection is just beginning to form between them and may develop over time. Rusty might find a partner in Tala. Rusty hands Tala a warm cup of tea, and she feels its rich aroma. After a short, awkward pause, Tala said she wants to talk about the shaman with Rust. Rusty, with a shadow of doubt in his voice, asks if she means the one who sent the familiar for her. Tala confirms and says that as soon as Rusty left, she followed him to the capital. Shame overwhelmed her and she destroyed her church. It was then that a curse fell upon her, bringing shame and the tracker. But after Rusty lifted the curse, Tala quietly found the shaman's hideout and remained unnoticed. Unfortunately, he escaped, but Tala still found some interesting chips there and gave one to Russ. Rusty suspects that the chip might be cursed, so before inspection he puts on gloves with a scroll cleansing effect. He asks if Tala showed it to the Alchemists Association in the capital. Tala assures that she did not do that, it seemed too risky to her, so she tried not to attract attention. She adds that the church was in an emergency state. The walls were covered with holes of various sizes, and there was an unpleasant smell in the air. Russ turned their faces into soulless masks like Walking Dead. He suspects that all this trouble is caused by a slime-like creature or some other unknown entity. It seems someone has already taken care of it. The highest variant is Rusty prays to hide the chips. He says that the chip is a magical board that transforms magical elements into real flame. That transmutation trait that became the hallmark of the Alchemists Association. He also says that there was a whole pile of magical pistols in the stash, hinting that there is a connection between the association and the shaman. This situation greatly worries Rusty. Magical weapons really work against other living creatures, but they do not affect humans. As soon as the magical element is changed, a phenomenon arises. It is called loss during transformation. If this weapon is only for monsters, there is no need to change elements. This means that the transformation was created to be used against humans, and it is already showing its true intentions. Tola feels anxiety. She clearly understands the consequences this discovery may lead to. Rusty adds that there is another problem: the weapon will likely misfire. If it can harm people nearby, probably no one planned this, therefore it indicates a mistake. Rusty bitterly regrets that this sloppy work comes from his former workplace, and he is deeply disappointed by their careless management. Tola says she did the right thing by turning to Rusty, and sincerely thanks him for the important advice. Rusty offers Ptolemy Lady Colin, who cannot wait to introduce them. Tala sincerely thanks for the delicious tea and is about to join Rusty. But he has matters to attend to, so he cannot dine with her. Zala and others are leaving tomorrow, so Rusty must focus on turning the fruits of Kegra into magical crystals. Starting work at the dining table, Lady Colin from Talamida sat surrounded by a multitude of appetizing dishes. Tala glances at the women sitting to the left and right of Colin's, probably her faithful companions. The kind Lady Colin, with a slight smile, warmly welcomes Tala to the Dominion. Round thoughtfully pondered how strange twists of fate brought Tala together with the caravan and allowed her to protect it on the road. Seeing that Tala was weary from travel and hungry, Colin smiles and says they prepared a small meal, though in reality the table is bursting with dishes. Before her lay a luxurious feast that awakens all the senses. Thanking her goddess, Tala begins to enjoy every bite and feels as if she has entered another world. The meat explodes with flavor in her mouth. Herbs and juices perfectly combined, creating an incredible culinary delight, and Tala thinks this unique meat might come from a monster whose taste she has never experienced. She draws a bitter conclusion. Since magic is felt in the monster meat, this special dish probably belonged to a creature of high rank. Summoning her courage, Tala asks Lady Colin if the appetizing meat that delights her taste comes from the horn of a twin lion, and Lady Colin's face lights up with a smile. She is impressed by Tala's accurate guess, which she got right on the first try. Colin enthusiastically praises Tala's gastronomic intuition, confirming that the meat is indeed from the horn of a twin lion, a steak from an adult female. Among the 9 horned creatures, adult females are especially valued. Their meat is rich with elements and powerful magic that permeates their bodies. Harry proudly adds that Rusty hunted the beast, clearly showing that he is a skilled alchemist. After enjoying the steak, a refreshing glass of cold ale was served at Tala's like the first bite of a juicy steak. The first sip of this drink, and she instantly finds herself in another dimension. She beams. The ale is wonderful, and its soft aftertaste truly impresses her. Tala never imagined that in such a wilderness she would come across such exquisite cold beer. Smiling, she says that from the Collins estates, one should expect exactly this quality. Colin proudly says that these extraordinary dishes and drinks are the merit of a unique magical item created by Rusty, which makes every served dish even tastier. While the conversation continues, a quiet pang of envy creeps up on Colin. He sees a connection between Tala and Rust. Here she asks about that morning meeting of Tala with Rust. Tala explains in a firm voice that she wants revenge on the shaman who wronged her comrades. She says that she came across a clue from Alchemy and brought it to Rusty for him to analyze. Colin nods, admits Rast is a true master of alchemy. The warm atmosphere, probably due to the cold ale, prompts Tala to talk about the past and his desire to honor fallen allies. Under the bright moonlight, Tala's heart gently glows every time she recalls the past. 2 years ago in the Guild of Turnit's Temple of Erasure, little Sheila with shining eyes joyfully showed Lady Knight Tala a doll in a newly sewn outfit. Sheila, who made it herself, could not wait to share her success with Tala, who had given her the doll. Tola enthusiastically praised Sheila's sewing, delighting her with the equipment. Someone asked if Tala was going to the city, and indeed he was just about to go for usual shopping. Sheila gently asked for a cute ribbon for the doll. Before leaving, Holly's Forsh's friend came. She asks Albert for liver and promises Al as soon as she returns. The church in the dense forest outside the city constantly needed provisions, so Tala set out for them that day. With her long list, she decided to start early in the morning. Parish Chief Silly a Manning approached Tala. Keep your finger on the pulse of the shopping plans, and noticed that they had few medicinal herbs, so it was time to replenish the supplies, and a silly smile appeared. Advised Talon not to overtrain. Getting injured himself would be too risky. To Tala's Celia was like a mother, respected for her kindness and keen sensitivity. She noticed everything. Silly blessed Holly for a safe journey, and Holly set off on her daytime trip. Returning to the present, Tala asks Colin about the 3 faces of the goddess Erie, and when he correctly names them love, wisdom, and revenge, it pleases Tala. Tola recalls how she was taught love and revenge through these lessons. Her training was prolonged, and when she returned from shopping, it was already dark. Tragically, while she was away, the shaman attacked the church. Talech recalls how he was overwhelmed by a feeling of being late after he got the ribbon and rare ingredients. She hoped Celia would not be too upset. Approaching the church, Tala noticed a bright light over the hill and saw that the church was on fire. She saw the lifeless body of Sheila in the middle of the fire. Tears rolled down. She mourned the painful death in duels. The assembly hall where the fire likely started was flooded with light from outside. Through the broken windows, the flames flicker. Shocked, Tala reached for the sword but froze and could not act. She is still suffocated by guilt for doing nothing. When the fire died out with the sunrise, Tala first recognized Silly by her body. Although Silly was badly burned, his kind smile remained even in death. When Tala tried to hold her, the shaman's curse took effect, and Tala became angry. The shaman defiled Celia's body, taking advantage of the fact that she was considered a beloved. He cursed everyone who approached. Shame for the failure did not leave Tala. The cursed bruises on her face screamed of the disgrace she felt toward Celia. She thought that others deserved to live longer than she did. Calm her down and sincerely say from the heart that you are very sorry that you touched such painful memories. Talak, the Lady Knight, honestly admits she is indebted to Rusty, because he was the one who lifted the curse. She intends to give him her sword as soon as the revenge subsides, and Colin fully senses her determination. Greeting Talha in her domain, he assures her that she will always be welcomed here with joy. Tala gently encouraged, addressing her simply by her name. Meanwhile, the master alchemist, exhausted after several hours of transformations, feels unbearable thirst. Erie enters carrying food and drinks and asks him to take a break. Having achieved his goal, Rusty happily takes a break and eats standing up. His faithful friend Erie brings chairs to make it more comfortable. Rusty apologizes to Erie for the inconvenience and sucks on ice that soothes his throat. Erie smiles and says that Leitna brewed ale for the welcome feast. Leitna was proud to have perfected his drink. He had been relentlessly experimenting with it since he started riding horses. Rusty is simply delighted with this ale. Its unique aroma reveals that it used plant ingredients of the monster type. He realized that Leitna not only monitors the food supplies, he also creates wonderful drinks. Eric recalls Leitna's joy at the moment when a barley monster, which he had tracked, broke into their holdings. Rusty looks at the dish, a steak with 2 horns. Although it had been brought before, this time for the first time it is served as a thick piece. He enthusiastically praises the camp cooks. Even with usual ingredients, they constantly make dishes vibrant, and the variety and method of preparation make them interesting. Erie says that food is one of the main highlights of their remote corner. Then she suddenly changes the subject and asks Rusty if he noticed the special abilities that she and her sister have. Rusty confirms he indeed suspected so when they set an ambush on the outer camp. He suggests that Rohan might see from afar or even through objects. And NACRE, when measuring strength, points to the related power. Erie, slightly smiling, confirms he is mostly right. Rowan has sharp, farsighted, and penetrating vision. Although Eric can, just for a moment, look into the future. Rusty is amazed by their abilities. Magical eyes are rare. But the future place feels like something mythical. Erie downplays her gift, turning it into something small and insignificant. Explain that it only activates during potential conflicts and grants a few seconds of foresight. Rusty asks with a slight challenge in his voice if she is familiar with his fighting style. He notices her face covered with fabric and imagines her smiling as if she already knows everything, and tells her do not respond. Instead, no one even asked if she was comfortable sharing so much about her powers. Harry explains that her trust grew from his past actions and helping others. That's why she trusts him. She shows a napkin near her face and says, "This is what I want to talk about." Rusty feels before him is a magical object that serves as a seal. His sharp intuition does not fail. It is necessary to check whether she will have to mend the fabric. Erie whispers that these magical items were created to prevent their power from getting out of control, but now their effect is weakening. Rusty understands their powers are still growing. Instead of patching the fabric, he suggests making 2 new magical items and quietly adds that it will probably take time. Erie sincerely thanked the alchemist for his generosity and promised to repay him. But he categorically refused any compensation because he considered everyone family. Praising her dishes, he decided to return to his current affairs and assured her that he would check his sister's clothes tomorrow. He left deeply immersed in thoughts about returning to the magical crystals. The next day, the hall brightened with joy when the alchemist announced that he had transformed all the crystals overnight. Ross asked if Salt could return them all back. The amazing deed dispelled all doubts, so he took on managing the load of the mules. He enthusiastically praised the alchemist and acknowledged his exceptional skills. Then Ross set off to pick up the important person who was with them. Soon Zala returned with the mammals. A civilian official from the Dominion, Dalton, who seemed to be overseeing the deal, was walking alongside. Nemmels froze with surprise upon seeing that a pile of Cager fruits had turned into magical crystals overnight. He sat down next to Colin to discuss the payment. Rusty news buzzes that the village head seems to have prepared his feudal lord for the deal. Suspecting that the alchemist would complete the task overnight, Rusty noticed that Mammal's feather was a true magical tool. Filled with enchanted elements, it protected important documents from forgery and unauthorized edits. And the seal used by the mammals also turned out to be a magical item. Rusty noticed the amount on the parchment was twice the previous year's budget for the basic research department. The mammals handed Colin a payment check, and he took it. The official asked to pay the part related to Rust, according to the contract. Colin unexpectedly announced the creation of the Dominion Department of Alchemical Research, which she would personally lead, and appointed Rusty as its head, completely catching the alchemist by surprise. He agreed, but his decision was immediately reacted to. Colin added that for now the money for the new department would be taken from the profits of selling magical crystals, deducting Russell's share. The master alchemist smiled. He knew that opening a new department was not easy, and he already imagined the paperwork troubles awaiting the mammals, so much so that the official was almost gearing up against him. Meanwhile, Colin promised the mammals that the crystals would reach their destination and even enter his possession, as agreed. Mammals, smiling with satisfaction, promised that the logistics would be organized smoothly. He was determined to manage strategic resources effectively. Rusty noticed that colonels rarely plot anything, so he simply allowed 2 officials to handle the details. Before leaving, he approached Rusty and warmly congratulated him on his new role. She passionately wanted to see how he would cope, and he, fired up, decided to track the shaman using the information he himself had given. The knight said goodbye, sincerely wished him success, and walked away. Rusty watched her back, quietly hoping her revenge would succeed before returning to Colin. According to Lady Rose, his duties would hardly change. He would still deal with footwear on campus using alchemy, transform magical crystals, and conduct basic research. But he had to put research first in his role. Colin decisively said that he could freely manage the budget. It is within reason if he reported all expenses. She imagined how the department would finally separate and become an independent unit with a larger team, and asked him to suggest a name for it. Rusty begins to rack his brains over the name of the new department. I strive for something truly unique from the Alchemists Association. He goes over names in his head. Some smell of the Admiralty Dominion, others carry the echo of his alchemical work. Realizing he could not choose immediately, he refocuses on his affairs. When two sisters stand outside his tent, loudly calling and saying, "We have come." The sister enters inside, and Rusty, pressing his lips, says he wants to test them because of what Erie said earlier. He remembers how during her last visit Roan constantly inspected the tent, as if studying rows together with her magicae. He considers it an interesting ability. Rusty orders the rows to form two chairs for them. He then approaches the sisters to examine the flow of magical elements in their eyes and understand the role of the magical fabric restraining their powers. At first, he asks them to tightly wrap their eyes with a sealing scroll to completely block their magical sight. While this is happening, he is going to conduct a basic check of their magical clothing. Erie with a trembling voice asks who should go first, and Rusty is not surprised at all. They feel anxiety because the risk of removing that magical item, which is constantly worn on their face, does not give them peace. The alchemist suggests start with a strike on the row. When Erie's magicae increases the load on her body, he hands Erie the scroll and whispers how to wrap it around Rohit's head to cover her eyes. As soon as the scroll is securely closed, Rusty seals it and Rohit's sight sinks into complete darkness. He is sure the scroll is intact, so he asks Erie to remove the magical item from her sister. Erie agrees, and Rusty orders the privates to bring the magical element tester a device that emits weak magical fields to check magical items. I lean over and carefully check whether the magical stone is intact. He places the fabric on the table to examine where the magic in it comes from. That is concentrated in the very center of Roque's forehead. When she puts it on him, Rusty grabs the pendulum and uses it to measure the flow of magical elements. And he considers the structure of the magical fabric is quite simple. He notices a buffer and an amplifier on the fabric. He thought they were a bit superfluous. The functions of this thing can be significantly improved, and he suspects that the alchemist who created it was probably mediocre. It would be enough for Rusty to embed a few of his magical circuits, and in an instant he would create a much better item. He cannot decide whether the first alchemist was close to the sisters, and hesitates about how much to tell. Looking at the sisters, he saw with relief that Rowan had relaxed. He hands Erie the magical item and asks her to place it again on Rohit's face. Rusty then carefully begins to remove the seal and gently takes Rohit's hand and initiate the exchange protocol so that the item starts working better. After that, he asks Rohan to keep the scroll with him just in case. He doubts whether he was mistaken, but Rohit's reassuring words confirm that the experiment succeeded and dispel his anxiety. The alchemist finished examining the sisters and was inspired by the idea of creating two new magical items for them. But although he knew they were better than the ones they currently had, he could not decide whether to give them away. He understands well, when new things appear, the old ones will have to be replaced. Special abilities appear rarely, and there are still so many mysteries surrounding them. He fears that psychological influence might disrupt their control. If the goal is simply to reinforce their powers, the old items might turn out to be better. It is a difficult choice, and he thinks of creating a device to measure and compare their ability to control magic. Separately, Rusty feels as if his recent research has stalled due to routine tasks and a meager budget at his previous job. Having received the budget, Rusty pondered. It is not just about pushing productivity, it is time to look for a completely different approach. He imagines items that can simply be turned on or off completely, with short intervals when everything was on autopilot. He hesitates whether to invert the formula and apply it in a completely different context. It might bring the desired result. Later, he approaches Rohit, who is waiting and smiling, tells her that he made two new magical items for her. He holds up two pairs of glasses in front of himself. At first, this confuses the sisters. They have no idea how to use them. He theatrically shows how to put on the glasses, then with a half-smile asks them to undress. The sisters glow with joy. They finally clearly see each other's faces and feel renewed thanks to the glasses. Rusty smiles widely and enthusiastically, says that these glasses suit both of them perfectly. At first, Erie is a little embarrassed, getting used to the new item. But Rusty does not calm down, continues to explain how everything works and starts with the Rodex glasses, which seem to fit perfectly. He explains, if you push them under her nose, they immediately switch to sealing power mode. Vesluvania persistently checks how the glass works until it is completely satisfied. Rusty quickly takes them to the Armored Summit, where since Apollo defeated the boss Panda, sounds have massively flowed upstream. Roan hits the salmon with one precise strike, a skill that even Colin could not compete with. It is necessary to find out if something is wrong with her regarding this item. But Rowan is sincerely satisfied with her glasses. Finally, she learned to control her magical eyes, and the world flashed before her in bright colors. Rowan notes that in the new glasses, the transition between transparency mode and long-distance vision mode is smooth. Yet she still mentions one drawback. Although voice control was indeed useful, she much preferred touch control. She also advises controlling with the left hand; it will be more practical that way. She holds the spear in her right hand. Rusty accepts her remark and immediately grabs the glasses to adjust them. He rewrites the magical scheme, slowly moving all control elements to the left side. He returns the improved glasses to Rohit, who gladly puts them on and begins to joyfully spin around the pond. Erie and Rusty smile at her while the armored salmon perfectly lands on her spear. Not surprising, the older sister used her magical eye, predicted when the salmon would jump and knocked it down. Rusty thinks confusedly. Does her magic work outside of battle, or did she see a future in which he accidentally revealed his thoughts? Harry, smiling, tells him that he is not entirely wrong. Meanwhile, Realism is boiling with rage. The president of the association orders him to find Russell. All departments have problems with the quality of the main materials. Because of this, transmutations fail and are delayed, and buyers are already demanding compensation for missed deadlines and poor quality materials. The president reminds Realism of his former words that Russell's departure would change nothing, and now he is in a panic. How to explain the current crisis? The president harshly criticizes Realism, says that he has tarnished the association's reputation, and failed to fill the void left by Russell. Their buildings have large holes from the explosion, and the stench still hangs in the air. Despite all these problems, Realism is still against Rusty's return. They were confident that their sales without him broke all records, and were hoping for the recent delivery of magical crystals. The president sharply interrupts and instructs Realism to compensate for Russell's absence. If Realism fails, the president threatens to make him personally retrieve Russell. Realism reluctantly agrees and immediately accuses Rusty of chaos, just as he did before. Returning to the Army Alchemy department, he immediately comes under scrutiny. Other alchemists instantly notice his gloomy mood. Then Salazar enters, bringing grim news and a report. The feeling is as if most of the newly sent magical crystals of the new style have returned back. Realism's anger flares up as he inspects the returned cargo. He decisively demands payment details and orders Todd to contact the wholesalers. But she enters and with a trembling voice asks what to do with the returned crystals, which bring important income. Realism orders Todd to go to the warehouse, clear everything there, free up space, put the returned cargo there, and at the same time find out where it was supposed to be sent. The alchemists hesitate, unsure whether to throw away those things that look old, but they have no other choice. They head to the storage rooms and immediately start tidying up to free space. Skinny notices old wooden boxes and mentally decides that this is just outdated equipment from the former Fundamental Research Department, what he considers unimportant. In the box, she comes across a colorless, transparent liquid and immediately considers it a useless potion. Tortora suggests simply throwing everything into the river, without even checking if it is possible at all, because he hopes to avoid further angering his boss. The alchemists dive into work, and Skinny borrows a transneutered beast to carry wooden boxes to the river. In these boxes were concentrated solutions of magical elements, the very ones Rusty often used in his early research. Fortunately, these magical elements do not harm people, so their disposal into the river will not bring immediate disaster. However, when the harm is not visible, no one will notice what Tal and others have done until it is too late. The consequences may not appear immediately, and no one knows what this will result in the long term. It seems Russell's actions angered that fat, corrupt master, who strongly resembles the irrational math teacher you remember from school. In the communication room of the Alchemists Association, chaos reigns, and Salazar, holding a paper, reads it and looks completely puzzled. Suddenly, Master Realism bursts through the door and scares the poor worker so much that he does not manage to respond. Realism immediately approaches and grabs the paper from his hands. His brow is so deeply furrowed that complete confusion is visible. Old magical crystals are scattered around, and there are quite a few of them. Realism suddenly fills with anxiety, as if he cannot believe it. Import was completely stopped because of these old magical crystals, and Realism suspects that some association member is smuggling them in, but that sounds unlikely. Any alchemist who betrays the association is immediately expelled. An unlicensed alchemist could never pull off such a scheme. Soon Realism will piece everything together and recall Russell's departure from the association. He suspects that Rusty is behind all this, but clients are returning magical crystals of the new style, and at this rate the association risks accumulating unsold goods. Realism throws the question about sales to another alchemist, and as it turned out, things have improved a bit. But overall, the association's prospects look bleak. Realism is now angry. He is sure that Rusty is in control of everything, and if that is true, Realism will have to swallow his pride and ask Rusty to return. But his ego is obviously too big to accept such a possibility. A woman from the doorway tells Realism the boss is calling him and looks angry. Realism will not let Rusty go for some time yet, but because he went into the forest with some suspicious people who are sneaking through the dense thickets. Sunlight reflects off Realism's bald head and shines like a lonely moon. His eyes, full of tears, gleam with disappointment, and it seems that now he is powerless to change anything. The boss called Realism and ordered him to bring Rusty back to the association. This task is not to the liking of the stubborn old man, but he has no other choice, so he carries out the boss's direct order. Realism splurged to hire several rough-looking thugs who were to join him on the trek through the forest to retrieve Russell. His decision smells of doubt. The hired men look as weak and clumsy as he does, but it is still better than going alone. One lawbreaker hesitates about the route, but reality still breaks through him. They insist they are on the right path, but it turns out, instead of taking Russell, these fools plan to kill the unsuspecting alchemist, and this is a big failure for them. Russell is the hero of the story, and he is not as simple as he seems. The group carries magical schemes from the association, created to change elements. They plan to use them as weapons against Russell. Realism says Rusty must be burned to ashes. His cruel desires are doomed to fail. He devised a cunning plan and ordered his people to lure Rusty into a trap that attracts monsters so they would devour him. It is a vile plan. Their distorted sense of reality fuels greed. They are sure that Russell, a probable source of magical crystals, is rich, so they gladly agree to share the loot, not doubting that the plan will work. With proud confidence, the group believes they could eliminate Russell. Realism mocks Rusty, calls him a fool for going into a remote, beast-filled wilderness, and says that if he dies it will be only his fault. His logic is tangled like complex chemistry. Moreover, Realism spits on the boss, who prefers clean operations. He shouts to his group that many local monsters are very sensitive to sounds. They are going to use this for 6,000 creatures on Russell. Unexpectedly piercing scream of Realism attracts a sound-sensitive creature that attacks from behind. But it turns out to be just a small, seemingly warm creature that the group easily overcomes. Thousands of monsters are approaching. This is a serious danger. So they ordered to use magical chains, because the elemental change consumed too much magical energy. Stubborn mercenaries do not listen to his wise advice to Annette to hit the targets, and soon their magical crystals will be exhausted. They plead with Realism to give spare crystals and weapons, but he has nothing. Cowards flee, leaving the realists alone with the threat. Betrayal hurts like a blow to the heart. But as a member of the association, he has decent skills, so he throws himself into battle with the monster, casts spells and breaks worm-like creatures. Realism desperately holds out against the relentless swarms of monsters. Strangely, his transmuted pike the only means of attack, but the parasitic fat of Garber is stuck in his body, and this is a critical flaw in his alchemy. Because of this inefficiency, he is afraid to engage in battle. Unfortunately, having no other means, he is forced to fight for his survival. Real does not stop, destroys monsters one by one. He throws spores that suck the life out of fierce creatures, and from their remains grow living mushrooms that rapidly tear flesh and kill them. Standing amid a huge pile of monsters he killed, Realism is forced to admit the harsh truth. Even more monsters are approaching. He stubbornly keeps fighting, though the attacks do not cease. Having no choice between battle and death, he goes through the bodies of monsters. One of them sneaks up and bites him cruelly. The pain is so strong that it reminds him of his ancestors who fought the enemy. His face looks tired with deep features of anger. It is badly wounded, but he manages to kill the worm that attacked him. He knelt on one knee, leaning on the other leg, examines the wounds and wonders if the potion will heal him. While the surrounding landscape strewn with the corpses of monsters he killed with alchemy and overgrown with mushrooms looks eerie. After recovering from the fight, Realism abruptly stands up and approaches Russell, loudly shouting that Rusty is to blame for his recent suffering. Swearing revenge, he devised a trap to lure Rusty back into the association, then ambush and destroy him at the peak of joy. But his insidious plan is doomed to fail, for events will unfold otherwise. Burdened by a heavy build, Realism struggles forward, stubbornly looking for Rusty across the wide expanses, while Rusty enjoys a quiet moment with faithful Hippo, focused on an important alchemical task, sucking magical elements from the soil to cultivate. When too many magical elements accumulate in the soil, they suffocate plant growth and can turn them into monsters, so alchemists have to extract these elements and release them into the air. Rusty digs pits in cracked, powdery earth so large that his hand fits into one. The soil is hard to dig, but Rusty finishes the work, and Hippo, his faithful horse, watches with curiosity. Rusty suggests digging in turns, and Hippo gladly agrees. Rusty steps back, letting Hippo dig, and impressed by his skill shows him the spots marked by Mark, and the work finishes quickly. Rusty moves on bolts transformed in his hands, and he is ready to extract magical elements from them. Hippo wants to help, but when Russell sees how difficult this task will be for his four-legged friend, he takes it upon himself to do everything. Having made sure there are no leaks, he begins the spell and decisively launches the redirection of the magical element. And the bolts come alive, drawing magic from the earth, while Rusty watches tensely to avoid pulling out more than he can withstand. because otherwise this power will turn against him and cause harm. Looking at the pendant on his left wrist, he felt the memory of the day it was given to him emerge. The talisman from his hometown was Ari's way of thanking Rusty for the magical thing he gave her. Rusty asks if she knows about the charm and the faint blush. She explains that the charm can be cut. Rusty is glad to learn that it is from Rohan, but wonders why the ability to cut it makes it special. Returning to the present, Rusty stops to catch his breath, leaning on the hippopotamus. The spells will last some time, so he decides to read the predecessor's article to avoid boredom. He pulls out a study comparing how many magical elements are contained in the soil and in the plants that grew in it. He recalls how, before leading the Alchemists Association, he copied all the papers of the basic research department onto a scroll. He was sure that realism and the others would reject them. However, Rusty immerses himself in the predecessor's paper, captivated by its conclusions. It states that if a little magical element is left in the soil, food becomes tastier for people. According to the theory, our brain deceives itself. Magical ingredients in food seem to it like enhanced flavor, although the actual taste does not change. Russell's research shows how magical elements affect the human body, and this article generously shares useful conclusions. The article contains interesting remarks about his work. The hippopotamus Rusty Ponder informs him, and he suddenly notices that the task is almost complete. Rusty stands up and checks his concentration, making sure it is perfect. He praises Hippo for monitoring the ground and reporting in time. But before he can move on, Harry runs up from afar and warns that someone has come to see him, and this could be a problem. Rusty wonders, is this some troublesome person? He asks Erie if the visitor identified himself, and Sweaty Erie confirms that he is real. It seems the fall of realism is about to unfold. Rusty thoughtfully asks himself why realism came to see him. Recalling his academic years, he is overcome with anxiety, but he decides to return to the community to meet the unexpected guest, and on the way asks Erie to tell him more. Rusty Nance Hippo extends his hand to Erie. She hesitates at first, is shy and trembles with uncertainty, but finally grabs his hand and sits down. Rusty tells her to hold on tight because he is going to speed up to return quickly. Erie feels the ride as exciting and strangely cozy perhaps, because she is sitting behind the passionate, promising young man like Russell. And although the wasteland is rough and uneven, it seems to her that Hippo adjusts the speed to keep them safe. Or maybe it is Rusty Equit Tipo with expensive Fox shock absorbers on 4 legs. Rusty says that realism was a former colleague from the Alchemists Association, known for causing trouble, and he imagines him with a pale, almost white face. He gathers facts like puzzle pieces, and begins to suspect that realism's visit is closely connected with problems of the magical crystal. A chill runs through him as he prepares for the upcoming confrontation. Noticing Eris's discomfort, Rusty gently asks if everything is all right. At first, the kind woman admits that she cannot see the future clearly, but she feels a gloomy confrontation approaching like a real war. Erie says that her vision flickers and this intensifies her fear, and Rusty asks about the monocle he gave her, curious about how it works. Erie quickly says that the magical thing Rusty forged for her works flawlessly, and thanks to the special monocle, she now notices the first signs of the approaching battle and manages to prepare for the upcoming trials. Rusty was even surprised when Erie answered his question before he could fully ask it. Let's assume the monocle works perfectly. He then, a bit embarrassed, asks if she means that he and realism will clash in the future, and Harry confirms it is almost certain. But she adds, this is not just a fight. Instinct whispers to her that something deeper is brewing, and it's hard to explain because she has never felt this way before. Embarrassed and shy, Ari withdraws from the conversation, and Rusty doesn't even pay attention to her departure. Thank her sincerely for those valuable ideas. While Hippo trudges heavily over uneven terrain, Harry's anxiety grows. Her thoughts are heavy with the anticipation of that decisive moment related to Russell's choice. She knows that the turning point, when the best and worst outcomes weigh equally, is already at the doorstep. In her imagination, Erie feels her fate slowly unraveling. She sees 2 men standing opposite each other in the middle of a barren wasteland, where the presence of a shaman is palpable. Rusty, noticing the anxiety in Erie, looked around. Her eyes were glowing with magic, and it became clear that her perception had sharpened. The monocle is working at full capacity. It is aimed directly at her magical sight. This vision of the future exceeded all of Russell's expectations, and he is simply amazed by her power. Lost in anxious thoughts, he absent-mindedly almost slipped. But Rusty quickly supports her and asks, hold on. Erie thanks him with relief and says that she is fine. Rusty notices that her future website has stopped working. You suddenly realize the tension from her magical eye is much stronger than you thought. Rusty vows to protect everyone, no matter what fate may be, and sincerely calls Erie his family. We leave the nature of their bonds undefined, not like brothers or sisters, but perhaps much deeper, and in the family narrative we leave this mystery to the imagination. With a determined smile, Rusty tells Erie, hold on tight, I'm going to speed up. Hippo, his faithful horse, gallops forward on 4 strong legs and quickly reaches the camp. Meanwhile, Erie leads Rusty to the place where realism is. She has very sharp senses. She mourns in the ominous aura that bursts from realism itself, and makes Rusty freeze and ponder. Could this be connected to her ability to become transparent? When they approach, he suddenly notices Lady Colin nearby. He politely apologizes to Colin for their delay, then heads towards the hostile, almost beastly reality. Facing a master of alchemy like realism is a true challenge, especially for Colin, who is stronger in physical combat than in alchemy. Rusty understands, fighting realism alone might prove too difficult for her. With determination in his eyes, Rusty gathers everyone, takes command and marches straight toward realism. He dramatically pinches his nose, jokes that something stinks, and hints at the presence of realism. The master alchemist responds with the same contempt, though reluctantly gritting his teeth and preparing for confrontation. While realism, pushed by his intrigues, announces that the Alchemists Association is restoring the basic research department, and the president extends Rusty a chance to return. Realism reaches out as if wanting to be a friend, and asks Rusty if he is glad for the chance to return to the Alchemists Association, but a false note almost emerges from his tone. Rusty senses hidden hostility in the air and replies coldly and briefly to the offer. He openly says that he left the association by his own choice and consciously acknowledges that the closure of the basic research department influenced his decision, but now sees meaning and opportunities outside the association. Rusty sharply tells Realism, if you came only for Thisco, and Realism's pseudo-composer breaks down. He tears out a rough animal howl, not tears, but a primal burst of anger and frustration, a chilling sound that tenses Russell, Colin, Erie, and Rogan and forces them to take defensive positions, preparing for Realism's next move. When his plans fall apart, Realism's behavior suddenly changes completely. He declares that there is no choice left and he begins to activate his alchemy, his eyes shining with menace, and he promises to kill everyone present. Tension is rising. Rusty and his allies are preparing for the upcoming battle. They will have to unite against a formidable enemy, and Rusty, unperturbed, quietly explains that alchemists' fights to the death are forbidden. He risked losing his qualification. Unmoved, Realism smiles, radiating confidence in his skills, and arrogantly says he can defeat Russell, the main hero, and end the story right here. Rusty sees Realism dispersing spores from his mouth and calls everyone to retreat. Warning, transmuted creatures resembling slimy fungus can kill upon inhalation. The spores soon grow limbs. They look harmless, but are likely soaked with Realism's poisonous elements. Rusty decides to neutralize them all at once. He pulls out his magical tool, a small white wand that Erie recognizes from his work on magical crystals. Rusty launches a tornado at full power. Rushing straight at Realism's spores, he needs to loudly tell Realism that he is only a secondary character. As the clash between him and Rusty intensifies, he is not the villain of this story. Russell's tornado sweeps away Realism's dangerous mushrooms. Not knowing what these transformed beasts are like, Rusty carefully cuts them into small pieces to avoid surprises. While Colin, Erie, and Rohan smile confidently, their faith in Russell's masterful alchemy remains unshaken. Rusty, overly cautious, decides to relocate the mushrooms away from the camp to protect civilians, and this sharply contrasts with reality. A corrupt alchemist hired by a flawed system, whose negligence shows the harsh truth of many worlds. Realism stands in shock, face empty, while Russell's tornado turns his mushrooms into dust, swirling in a column and gathering into a grotesque mass resembling a smoothie. The disgusting sight captivates Realism's gaze. His eyes full of sorrow, his favorite creations turn into vile sludge. The tornado is about to engulf him, covering both him and the disgusting remains of his mushrooms. Meanwhile, Russell's friend cheered from the side, and the events unfolded so rapidly that they barely managed to keep up. Angry and humiliated, Realism sharply rises to his feet and frantically tries to wipe off the sticky mushroom slime clinging to him. He lets out a groan of pain and reaches for his mushrooms, but the slimy mass slips from his fingers, just like his fading chances to defeat Russell. In agony, he screams, wanting to know how Rusty could destroy his precious mushrooms. Someone has to get him out of this state. This is a fight, and Rusty has no emotional connection to those creepy mushrooms, unlike Realism. Rusty and his friend exchanged glances over Realism's ridiculous outburst, quickly gathering himself. Realism uses a manifest scroll to summon a giant mushroom that releases thick air around. Rusty mocks, calls it a smoke screen, and ridicules Realism, fleeing from the fight he started. But the gas, heavier than air, quickly settles and turns into a new threat. As expected, the coward runs away, and Rusty and his comrades stand stunned, not understanding why Realism appeared at all. Colin shouts to chase after him, but Rusty stops them and warns that the released gas might be toxic, despite its unstable effects. The fact that Realism is a master of alchemy still poses a serious threat. Rusty rapidly applies alchemy, purifies the air, and isolates the poison around them. The air slightly distorts, a sign that Rusty is separating the gases. As he already said, this alchemy requires maximum concentration. He carefully molds each gas into its own bubble, and one of them contains pure oxygen. Catching a ray of sunlight, Rusty ignites the oxygen bubble, and it instantly begins to descend. Just enough to cause a burst of thermal energy. Then, holding his breath, he carefully catches the possibly poisonous purple smoke in a jar so it cannot harm anyone. Returning to his friends, Rusty says he strives for realism, and Roget with sharp farsightedness notices something alarming. She shouts to Rusty, "Hide behind them, everyone is looking at the horizon," where a swarm of faded armored salmons rushes at them in frenzy. These creatures, just evolved, rush in a crowd, and Rusty does not believe in this strange coincidence of timing. They hesitated to fight them or choose a realistic approach. Colin takes command and directs Rowan and Erie to the front line to hold back the creatures and simultaneously assess their combat capability, while she takes position to control the battle and evacuate civilians. After everyone was ordered to prioritize survival, Colin returns to Russell as Master Rust and fervently promises their full support whether he chooses the path of realism or continues to fight. Rusty freezes for a moment, weighing the options. Instinct pushes him toward the realistic choice. He wonders to himself, is this the fateful moment that Rowan predicted? He stands before a decisive choice, to chase realism or stay to help Colin while others fend off monsters. And the drops of sweat on Russell's face testify to the weight of this decision. He knows that Colin and the others are fighting flying enemies. And here are these armored flying monsters with tough scales. Even without proper equipment or alchemy, it could overpower them. Most likely, the fight will turn into continuous defense, with the looming threat of human casualties. If realism breaks out, it will bring another big problem. Fights between alchemists are forbidden. Their unleashed power can destroy the environment. They put not only themselves but also nearby civilians at risk, and this can have serious consequences. So alchemist duels to the death are strictly controlled. Rusty clearly feels, if realism gets out of control, the damage could be much greater than the current threat. And if realism retreats and returns stronger, the danger could grow exponentially. Colin senses the risk and first rushes to protect the camp and civilians. In the end, she leaves the decision in Russell's hands, confident that at this decisive moment, he will choose the right path. After some reflection, Rusty says he will stay in the camp and will not chase realism. Looking at Colin, he sees the great, oppressive responsibility she bears. If there are sacrifices in his pursuit of realism, Colin, as the camp leader, will take upon herself the burden of sorrow and regret. He knows that she will hide her emotional fatigue. Rusty realizes he must stay here and save those who rely on him. Realism, smiling confidently, says they will deal with him later if he returns. Colin feels relief wash over him upon learning that Rusty will stay and fight alongside them. His decision fuels her determination, and as they prepare together for the threat, she feels a powerful surge of strength. Rusty prepares to fight back against the celestial salmon, standing firm and staring intently at the sky. Suddenly, Erie sharply exclaims that Rusty must strive for realism, but Collins immediately interrupts her. Confirming her authority, she insisted that they follow her orders. Erie reluctantly agrees and says they will do it as soon as they are out of Collins' sight. Rusty quietly apologizes to Erie, struggling to find the right words. Deep inside, he doubts the future that Erie predicted, and thinking about his past, he realizes that he has quietly become passive. Now he has been given a chance to change the future, because Colin and the entire camp have placed their trust and hope in him. Rusty decided he will protect what they have given him. He raises his eyes and sees the celestial salmon split into two groups, one flying to the capital, the other descending to the camp. Rusty watches, unsure whether this is good news or bad. Something in the capital could affect everyone, and the uncertainty weighs on him as he prepares for battle. Rusty calls Erie and Rohit and asks where the non-combatants are. They reply that they are being led to the food storeroom. A smart move. Armed with this, Rusty rushes to the camp to gather all the chemical supplies, not wasting a second, utters a spell and swiftly transmutes, using his best materials. Usually, he knows how to allocate resources and squeeze everything out of them to the last drop. But these things are too valuable. He knows they cannot be replaced. Saving the people of the camp is worth it. It is a small price. Rusty works with all his might to keep everything clean. Rapid changes anxiously exhaust him. Alchemy requires sharp concentration, like threading a needle, and simultaneously managing several chemical processes seems simply overwhelming. For a moment, he feels as if he is being pulled into unconsciousness. Still, Rusty gathers his last strength, drives away fatigue, and completes the spell. He crafts scrolls to resist enemies in the sky. Overall, he created 9 schools. When everything is ready, he steps out hoping that everyone still stands firm before the approaching threat. When Rusty leaves the camp, he raises his head and sees Colin cutting his way through flying salmons, and her full armor is smooth and black. He is impressed not only by her strength but also by her finesse. Considering the difficulties of youth, it becomes clear why Colin earned the title of warrior here. She is surprisingly stronger than most people, although she does not look bulky at all. Her heavy full armor and huge sword fully compensate for this. This allowed her to dominate the battlefield with her skill and strength. Noticing Rast, Colin rushed to him and asked if everything was ready. Rast nodded in confirmation. He scans the battlefield with his eyes. It is clear that Colin could handle it alone, but she shakes her head. She, pointing to the monster eggs scattered around, says she could not handle it alone and asks Rasty to take care of them. Rasty says, "We need to destroy all the monsters at once." He pulls out all the prepared scrolls and begins to recite the spell, launching them all simultaneously. If Rusty wanted to destroy the monsters, he would take the polished scrolls, but in the camp they would cause huge damage, so he chooses the manifestation scrolls. The monsters pounced on Rusty with terrifying speed, moving as one. But instantly they disappear. Rusty uses a strange chemical mixture to either hide the monsters or destroy them completely. Erie and Roy stand in the labyrinth, tensely listening to Rusty's explanation. Here is the practical application of manifestation. The scrolls can use the return function, sending parts of the monsters to another dimension, then returning them to a different place. And although this is a strange and confusing idea, their resolute confidence quiets all doubts. The fight ended with one move from Rust, and he notices that these celestial salmons are much larger than the armored salmons he had encountered before. From what he saw, he concludes, their enhanced fins help these formidable creatures maintain balance during flight, and the heart scales seem to conceal magic. Rusty imagines that Sem absorbed magical energy from the air for dynamic lift, and this idea excites him. Soon he decisively rushes at the monster to destroy it and lift the burden from Colin. He begins handing out scrolls one by one, quietly and decisively. At this moment of calm, we see Leitna, a diligent man who is sometimes in charge of the food storage, sometimes cooking, sometimes arguing with the team. Leitna tirelessly cares for the fallen bees, but there are so many of them that their number seems endless. A skilled fighter from the Harkness Combat Corps calls him Commander Lieutenant, with a smile, and offers to become bait to tactically attack the flying salmon. But Leitna firmly refuses, insisting that their circular formation must not be broken. Leitna throws an axe at the Salmona gesture, loudly proclaiming his determination. Martinez looks at him and waits for further orders. The terrible creatures seem endless. Leitner says that Lady Colin ordered them not to retreat, and he fully trusts her despite the difficult circumstances. He tells Harkness that they have come this far trusting Colin and will continue to do so, and Leitna asks everyone to hold on and encourages them. Although secretly he feels that soon they should look for a reason to retreat, he again trusts Lady Colin and continues the fight. Then what shocked everyone happened. He froze with open mouths when a monstrous creature appeared, chewing salmon as they rushed toward Leitna. He raises his weapon and calls everyone to be ready, but in a moment it becomes clear they no longer need to fight. Amid the chaos, the salmon continue to disintegrate and fall apart, and Leitna suspects that Russell's alchemy is behind this. The salmons instantly scattered in all directions, although their weapons had no effect. This is simply the incredible power of Rusty teams. No, if you asked Rast, he would probably start boringly repeating that knowledge is power and chemistry. Sorry, alchemy allowed him to achieve this. Leitner asks the young man with long hair for a report on losses and injuries, and sighs with relief upon learning that there were only 12 minor wounds and no deaths. But Harkness calls Leitner commander again, and it annoys him terribly. Leitner has said 1,000 times that he is no longer a commander, but people still consider him one. Harkness looks a bit depressed and asks Leitner, "Are we really no longer needed?" Leitner thinks for a moment and calls him a fool. If they had not managed to evacuate the civilians and the salmon had broken through immediately, it would have resulted in terrible losses. No matter how you look at it, the fighters are the heart of this battle, and it is pointless to obsess over one's own shortcomings. Leitner's sincere words seem to have touched Harkness, known for his strictness and seriousness. Leitner insists, without each person it is impossible to build a flawless defense. While Leitner is speaking, someone shouts that the mules are under attack. He instantly gathers 2 or 3 people to join him and rushes forward to deal with the remaining enemies. Meanwhile, Harkness thinks that Leitner is a true commander not because of his official rank, but thanks to wise leadership and unwavering determination, while Leitner himself is making a desperate attempt to escape from Rast. He screams from pain and torment suffering he inflicted on himself. Pride hurt him, and perhaps this is his only true concern. He wonders how everything could have turned out so badly, but anger prevents him from taking responsibility for his downfall. He unconditionally blames Rusty, claiming everything fell apart the very moment Rusty appeared in his life. Everything related to Rusty drives him mad because memories immediately surface. He recalls the moment when he eagerly showed his mother a basket of blooming mushrooms. They were a true fascination for him. But his mother found them disgusting and ordered him to throw them away before they spread further. The parents of realism, both talented alchemists who placed huge hopes on their son, and perhaps it was their excessive pressure and high expectations that destroyed him. Like a typical villain story, powerful parents decided everything. Wilson broke through obstacles and eventually led the military alchemy department. but as soon as he saw everyone praising young Rusty, his anger exploded. He earned his rank through relentless work, but had to watch a naturally talented person receive the recognition he so desired. Engulfed in thoughts, Realism begins to break down, cursing with rusty words, and he swears that all who caused him pain will suffer greatly, promises to drive them to despair and humiliate everyone, and his hatred for Rusty only grows stronger. Driven by the belief that everyone sees Rusty as better only because of his natural abilities, Realism looks at his knee and sees strange scars that push him into panic. He anxiously wonders how those marks appeared there, his head spins, and in despair he drinks a few sips of potion. But they do not help. Disappointed, he uses up his entire supply of potion and nothing gets better. As if his body has become immune to the very potion he relied on, Realism faces a pile of challenges. Disappointment deepens his despair, thoughts whirl in his head, and he decides to return to the association because he knows they will provide quality potions there, and he needs to get to the capital as soon as possible. With determination in his voice, he reads a spell and summons a parasitic transformed creature named Mixer Meat King. The grotesque monster engulfs him, and reality turns into a balloon in which only his head is visible without a visible lens. The sight is both funny and disturbing. It vividly shows the strangeness of his situation, but he still orders the creature to take him to the capital, and unlike his younger colleagues, the Mixer meets King obey. He swiftly heads to the association. Upon reaching the capital, Realism exits the strange Meat King Mixer, stumbles, but still finds himself on solid ground. Desperately searching for potion, he fears that his artificial appearance will attract unwanted attention from the guards. In torn clothes, he walks the streets and overhears whispers about a recent battle. His curiosity is awakened. Will he manage to reach the next corner where the Alchemists Association is located and get the needed potions? At the corner, to his horror, the same building where the Association of Alchemists once was now stood in ruins. Realism recalls his dedication to that place and feels as if everything he worked for is falling apart. At that moment, a shadowy figure emerges from the rubble, cloaked in darkness. The stranger raises a barrier, separating them, and approaches them with eerie persistence. The hooded figure studies Realism intently, noticing how he is expanding. He says that the SAM attack that destroyed the association was an accident, but that accident worked in his favor. Confused, Realism asks, who is he? The man in the cloak waved it off and said he was an unimportant person. But still, thanks to Realism for those sent faulty magical schematics. Before Realism can react, the hooded figure grabs his face and easily lifts him, draining his life force. He praises his demon and says that Realism understands mushroom magic well. With a single finger movement, Realism's wounds flare up, causing him unbearable pain. In a terrifying turn, a figure in a hood transforms reality itself into a monster and disappears. In a moment, the crowd gathers around Realism, which is now unconscious. Spores flew from the body of Realism, and this suddenly turned it into a monster. The frightened crowd fell into panic and scattered. Realism, barely noticing the world around, does not understand why people are fleeing and asks for help. But soldiers appear and aim their weapons at him, and chaos erupts as Realism fights his new existence. Unaware of the threat he has now become, Captain Harold orders his men to aim at the demon. In a moment, the air explodes with gunfire because everyone desires Realism. To Harold's misfortune, bullets safely bounce off the alchemist's body exactly as the reports warned. Realism has truly turned into a demon, and even magical bullets are powerless against him. Noticing the situation, Harold instantly calls off the attack. They are already short on men, and if Realism is a demon, there may be even more like him in the Alchemists Association. He orders his warriors to arm themselves with magical contours, which with a focused blast turn the elements into blazing flames. Realism desperately begs them to believe that he is still human, not realizing that no one will believe him. Suddenly, the soldiers fire a volley, and Harold does not look away. To his disappointment, he orders his men to stop shooting and instead draw their swords. The plan is simple: to rush at the demon. Realism, standing before a line of determined soldiers, feels a wave of fear wash over him. The thought of what awaits him throws him into a panic, and before anyone can run up, he already disappears into the sewer. Captain Harold looks distrustfully at the empty spot. Just a moment ago, demons were raging there. Returning to camp, Colin anxiously reports on the damage from the sky salmon attacks and on the profit expected from the collected magical stones. She says she wants to honor those who are being recognized, and calls Orion row forward. Colin praises them for to quickly assess the strength of the sky salmon and convey the most important details. Despite the risks, she later recognizes Leitna, the one who tirelessly stood up to protect the fighters so that no one was harmed. Just retired, the medic calmed the lively camp participants with his efforts and proved that his leadership qualities are still sharp. Finally, Colin praises Rusty for quickly neutralizing the sky salmon and not harming the camp. His actions averted the catastrophe, and Colin thanks him with all her heart. The alchemist froze in surprise when the entire camp suddenly began applauding him. The applause rolled in waves and echoed around. His regret over the escape of realism begins to subside, and a small, sincere smile appears on his face. Colin announced that she filed an official complaint to the Alchemists Association due to the attack of realism. She says that probably many saw that celestial salmon that attacked the capital, causing devastating damage to the Alchemists Association. Rusty cannot get rid of memories of his old home he was not going to return, but the news about the unrest there stirred something deep inside him. The royal castle also got into trouble, so he decides not to wait for orders. Instead, it is time for them to act to start distributing magical crystals right now. Colin nods. This means more work for Rusty, but Rusty just smiles. He enjoys it. He suggested it. In a few days, Colin's camp gathers again, and she says that the next shipment of fruits from Kaguro is already on the way, and they will focus on paving the way to their future. The ruler of the neighboring dominion supports the plan, and the colonizers' details will be agreed upon soon. He relies on their unwavering support. The crowd erupts with enthusiastic applause, then slowly disperses. Later, Rusty finally reaches the tent and sighs with relief after an exhausting day. Along the way, so many people stopped to talk to him that he felt a bit embarrassed and was not used to such attention at all. Suddenly, he notices, in his cage, a small animal. He is stunned. He sees that he now has wings, and his skin has completely shed. He is filled with amazement. Before him, not a lizard, but a real dragon. After all, he has never seen a dragon in his life. He realizes that this little creature was probably a dragon's offspring, and now he stands confused, not knowing what to do next. The little dragon seems hungry, but as soon as Rusty offers him a brick, he instantly pushes it away. Rusty guesses that the dragon might need meat, and remembers that he has some monster remains for crafting. Then he notices that the little dragon is intently staring at the potion and decides to try something. Rose the alchemist gives the baby dragon a small, safe dose of potion, and to his relief, the dragonling quickly drinks it. Although most creatures like Kippo would call this taste disgusting, Rust cannot contain his curiosity and asks if the little dragon wants more potion, preparing to use the scroll for transcription just in case to check if it is functional. He also asks Rose to watch over the dragon in case something goes wrong. Before reviewing several materials on this topic, he opens the scroll and finds no harmful effects. Something is clearly bothering him. He looks again at the little dragon. I think the time has come. It's time to give him a name. Later, Rusty sits down with the commander for lunch, and as if casually says that there might be a dragon hiding in his camp. Dragons are mostly just legends, so if this is a real dragon, it would be the first such appearance in many years. The alchemist says not quite sure. He still remembered how that creature seemed intelligent when he first saved it, so he thought it might be a dragon. Colin is not convinced and says that refusing the herb does not yet prove that the beast is intelligent. Rusty agrees but says that he intends to continue studying his mind. Colin smiles, feels that he has already made a decision. The alchemist says that at first he intended to release the creature if it turned out to be a dragon. He sincerely believes that he will be able to establish a connection with it. Colin looks confused when Rusty begins to talk about making a contract with the dragon and asks if it is just a fairy tale idea. The alchemist smiled. Fairy tales are mostly fabrications, but there is truth hidden in them. Colin looked away and wondered if contracts could really exist. Rusty assures her. Before any step, he will take all necessary safety measures, and Colin gives the green light to the experiment. But before Rusty could rejoice too much, she jokingly insists that she definitely wants to be present when it happens, and he just smiles and agrees. Knowing that Colin is insatiably curious, Colin asks him to inform her when he is ready. Rusty teases the others she is just curious to watch this spectacle. Colin happily admits she is simply delighted by what she sees. Later, Colin comes to the alchemist's tent. Rowan and Ariento are nearby. Rusty asks why they are here, and Rohan replies that they are on guard, and this reminds him that she was cautious about the beast from the start. So he begins to think that she probably does not like lizards. Rowan leans closer to the tiny creature to get a better look, but Rusty quickly stops her and reassures her that it is completely safe. She quietly apologizes. The alchemist notices that the usual magical glow has disappeared from her eyes. It seems her gift of foresight is not working. So a fight with the dragonling is unlikely to happen. Rusty decisively tells the sisters, stay behind Hippo. They say that Colin will handle it herself. She is the strongest here. Colin then asks skeptically how he plans to make a contract with the dragon. He explains if it is a real dragon, weak alchemy will not work, and stronger alchemy might harm it. So alchemy is not suitable. He turns to the girls and asks if they have ever heard of primal magic. Erie says that it is connected with life. It uses blood as a medium. Rusty whispered that his elder studied primal magic and now embodies those ideas. His mentor whispered that ancient legends about humans and dragons might be connected to this magic. But the dragon's call suddenly interrupts. Push Ari remind her that the alchemist can babble endlessly if not stopped. Arya apologizes, although she actually liked his explanation. Knowing they have a task to focus on, Rusty turns to the beast to start the experiment. Ask Rose to open its cage. He knows, although young, this creature is a dragon. It could easily hurt him, and although Rose might intervene, his anxiety does not subside. He offers the little dragon some potion, and Colin aloud suggests that it is bait for a contract. She does not get to say more because the other girls instantly silence her, and the little dragon drinks the expensive potion. Rusty thinks with slight reproach. He should have taken concentrated solutions of magical elements needed to prepare high-quality potion. Although they are not easy to create, he briefly recalls the solutions he left at the Alchemist Association and sincerely hopes they are safe. Focusing again, the alchemist suddenly remembered. Making a contract is connected with the primal magic of the dragon, as they say in fairy tales and myths. In a moment he pulls out a sharp knife. I tell the Juras that it is made from a horned horn. He explains that according to legends the ritual of making a contract begins with a person bringing blood, and determination is read in every feature of his face. He places the knife on his wrist and prepares to make a small cut. Rusty makes a cut on the wrist with the knife, and blood flows down the engraved patterns on the blade as he tries to create a coat of arms from his own blood. When having pronounced their name, they openly declared their intention. After the bond with the dragon, suddenly something completely unexpected happens. After his statement, ancient symbols began to appear before him. The spectacle was both captivating and confusing, but it was obvious that these signs meant something. Colin noticed his reaction and couldn't hold back. He asks if he notices anything. The alchemist became even more puzzled. Checks with the girls and learns with horror that they see nothing. He describes a polygonal plate forming right in front of him and admits that he has no idea what it is. The alchemist carefully examines the plates. They resemble alchemical rings, but they do not seem to be them. They are almost liquid, and it seems the dragon is urging him to touch them. Holland anxiously asks Ari if her magical eye senses anything, but only Rusty sees the strange phenomenon. Maybe this is the primal magic they talked about. Meanwhile, the Rusty faces encountered completely unfamiliar symbols. He thinks that by touching different parts, one can reveal different meanings and finally understand what those strange letters mean, and Rusty knows. One must act carefully. But curiosity makes him take the risk. When he touches the glowing symbols, they begin to change shape, and it seems to him that their number is connected to the pattern. But he is not sure about their system and does not know what might happen if he continues to touch them. He looks at the tiny dragon and suddenly sees it definitely understands what is happening. The alchemist sees light bursting from the wound on his wrist and touches the plates again. The tent is instantly flooded with bright radiance. When the light dims, Rusty notices with horror a fiery tattoo on his hand. The baby dragon has grown now. It is a little dragon with the same pattern on its chest. Stunned by the sudden growth, he gently strokes the dragon and decides to give it a name, combining safe with sacred and look with one who flies. He named it Saylook. Obviously, he succeeded. He made a contract with the dragon. Late at night, Colin suddenly whispers to Rusty that he will come to his tent. She came so late that it looked unusual, and the alchemist was a little surprised. With a bottle in her hands, she noticed that they had rarely seen each other lately. She steps forward and carefully pulls a device from the box. Rusty is picky about tools for experiments. The alchemist smiles warmly, accepts her gesture, and says he cannot refuse, assuring that the vessels he uses are thoroughly washed and completely safe. Colin asks about a snack, and suddenly it turns out she brought it, and Rusty didn't even notice. She hands over a package with meat and fish. Rusty, impressed by her care, asks Rose to arrange a small dining corner. In a few minutes, they are already settled at the table. Colin pours him a drink and notices that he freely wanders around the tent. She sincerely offers the dragon a drink. It flies up and lands on the alchemist's shoulder to rest there. Colin is impressed by their strong bond, and he wonders whether his potion caused this. She watches, holding her breath, as Sailor drinks one potion, and heals because she knows most potions taste like grass and are usually unpleasant. Rusty pretends to be offended by Colin's remark about his potion, but he knows she is just joking. They raise their glasses, toasting to new connections, and the alchemist is sincerely grateful to Colin. If not for her invitation, he would probably still be sitting in the Alchemists Association. Stuck in routine or took a different path. Thinking about how much he owes her, Rusty enjoys every sip, but his pleasure instantly turns to shock when the drink chokes him. He anxiously asks Colin, "What is this?" She says it is called Free Spirit. Colin explains that this drink can ignite anything. She herself hasn't tried it, thought it was a waste, but it is clearly very strong. Seeing Rusty struggle, Rose suggests diluting it with water. He stirs the drink and slowly tastes it, trying to get used to the new flavor, then turns back to Colin and asks her opinion with interest. As he suspected, she came not only for the drink. As soon as Colin spoke, the alchemist curiously tries to find out her real reason. Pouring herself another drink, the The commander finally remembers the road construction project she mentioned earlier and says they are now ready to start working on the plans that begin in a few days. Colin shares his hope that Rusty will help with the road work, and he listens attentively, feeling that the road is truly important for their future. Although the strong drink initially shocked and made him feel uncomfortable, he felt a new surge of purpose. Rusty willingly agrees to join the road construction. She is impressed by how skillfully Colin handles her drinks. Though she is overwhelmed with the duties of a feudal lady, he smiles when she offers a drink as if saying, "Look, I'm trying to befriend the dragon." Confident that this is how friends behave, he decides to stay by her side and enjoy the evening. The next morning, Rusty feels not very energetic. He cannot calm down. Something has changed in him after the contract, although outwardly it seems nothing has. The transcription scroll reveals physical data to us, and he uses a pendulum, swinging it to feel and check immaterial aspects. The alchemist believes that there is something more in the world than magical elements, and weaves strange theories about plates that appeared during the contract. Irritation grows as he again asks to say "look" to summon the tablet. The dragon cannot do this. Rusty thinks the plates appeared only because of the contract. He barely had time to think when the district already arrived and loudly made known it's time to start building the road. When Rusty and Erie set off for Hippo, the alchemist asks Say Luke to look after Rose while they are away. To his surprise, the sailor insists on going with him and without hesitation settles on his shoulder. The alchemists agree to bring the dragon and set off on the road to the destination. On the way, Erie looks at the dragon flying nearby and cannot help but notice its grace. Rusty nods and says he did not expect dragons to be so graceful. He is truly impressed by how easily Saluk soars in the air. Erie says, "I must become the first in a century to bond with a dragon." She says he knows much more than alchemy, and adds that during the contract ritual no one knew what was happening. Rusty downplays it and says it just somehow happened. His thoughts kept returning to the mysterious numbers and the translucent plate he saw. He briefly told the girls about his actions, and being the only one who saw those mythical symbols, he was gnawed on the road by the fact that he did not go further and find out more. Rusty cannot get out of his head the strange phenomena he saw, and the mysterious plate with its symbols seems like a key to understanding the primal magic related to the contract. And although there is a struggle in his heart, as an alchemist, he resolutely strives to decipher these signs and their meaning. He hopes that over time and with new experiments, he will find answers and better understand the magic that connects him with Saluk. And for now, he is fully focused on building the road ahead and knows that the journey is only beginning. Rusty understands that reproducing the results is vital, otherwise his conclusions might be considered fiction. So he smiles at Saluk, glad that the dragon is enjoying itself. Suddenly, Erie shouted to him. Monsters are sneaking up from below. She noticed them with her magical eye. She quickly prepares for battle and raises her spear. The alchemist cannot help but admire her lightning-fast reaction. Eric says that she barely defeated a dangerous group of monsters. She was worried that she had lost her form earlier. The armored salmon came to her easily. Rusty grimly orders Saluk to go upstairs, and Ariel anxiously warns him that 2 more monsters are approaching, and he leads the hippo to the right. Before he can even blink, suddenly a mutilated creature appears. But imagine this, Luke dives down and easily defeats it. The alchemist simultaneously felt relief and a surge of amazement at the dragon's lightning action. 2 people froze at his speed and strength. Everyone was even more stunned, watching his impressive attack. They had heard legends about dragons, but seeing a dragon in action is a completely different thing. When they approach the fallen monster, Rusty carefully examines it. He says this is a chimera, a strange combination of a small mouse and a centipede, possibly with mushrooms growing right out of its belly. This mixture of 4 creatures is a real rarity. No one in this region knows it. The alchemist fell silent. Perhaps this is a new species, and he is curious about what exactly attracted Hippo and Sailor's attention. He notices that the scenes with the hippopotamus begin to disturb him. Sensing something strange in the creature, Rusty checks the rewritten scroll and finds no trace of poison or hint of threat. He intends to take the monster for further study, but sees that Hippo is categorically against it. He suggests instead burn the creature to eliminate any risks. He asks Ari to pause so they can figure this out together, and Ari agrees to help. The alchemists instead advise her to continue observing, while he carefully rubs some potion into the limbs of Hippo and Salix to protect them from possible harm. Rusty sets the monster on fire and watches mesmerized as the flames engulf the monster. As the fire burns, for a moment he feels as if something is moving in the flames. Ari's voice brings him back. She says they are ready to continue the journey, and he turns away, leaving the ashes behind, ready to continue their mission. After taming the monster, the alchemist and his companions moved on, but their thoughts kept returning to that strange creature.